everyone, and welcome to the ForzaRC 2019 Invitational Series. My name is Gabriella La Tigris Devia Allen, and I will be your host and ultimate guide throughout all of today's festivities. Now, in past seasons, the Forza Racing Championship has introduced many to the wonderful world of hitting rubber to road. But today we come at you with a fresh coat of paint, complete with teams, coaches, a $250,000 prize pool, and much, much more. So what can you expect from the Invitational Series? Now, over the course of 8 weeks, 13 teams will compete. First in 3 full rounds spanning 6 weeks and 1 last chance qualifier. Until at our final land, we crown champions, baby. But just as these drivers will learn to rely on their teammates, I plan on doing the same. So welcome for the first time to our Invitational Series, our analysts. We got our Berg squared action going on here with Andy Flip Mode Berg and Brian Meckberg Eckberg. How you doing today, fellas?
I am so excited. The last time we were racing was December of 2018. It seems like a long time ago, and it seems like yesterday, but we're back. We're at it. Let's do this.
Racing's back, 180 miles per hour, double overtakes, spins, penalties, crashes, and a podium at the end of it.
Ah, podiums. I've spent a little too much time on them, but for a short person reason. So moving on from that, as we mentioned, we have lots of changes coming to you during this series, and we want to make sure you fully understand what to expect during this. So what are some of those key points?
You know, you touched on it at the very beginning, Gabby. We have team racing. Now, team racing, we've always had the concept of teams in Forza RC, but this time, we mean it. We have 3 drivers and a coach competing together, all contributing to the team's success for the very first time. And coaches mean new layers of strategy, Andy.
Communication, that's the first thing I'm looking for, is communication. Strategic, are they a driver or are they a communicator and a boss?
And Andy, we've talked a lot off of camera about the impact of that coaching role. So in terms of strategy and such, why do you think that is such an important addition during the series?
Well, I think we're going to see it today.
Yeah.
2 coaches are driving. They have to substitute, so right off the rip, we're going to see what a coach can do.
And you have these different kinds of roles. You have coaches that are former Forza RC drivers, and they're going to be able to slot right in. And you have these coaches that are there literally for moral support, for strategic reasons, but have never driven in Forza before. So if they have to sub in, it could be disaster for the team. So different flavors of coaches mean different levels of strategy.
And soon enough, we are going to get to meet the drivers and the coaches that you'll be following throughout today's broadcast. But before we get to that point, we want to make sure that you have a full understanding of all the rules and the ultimate format that we've landed on for this Invitational Series. So starting with the overall series, this is basically the layout leading all the way till the end of November, complete with your 3 rounds, the last chance qualifier, and the final LAN event.
Yeah, as you see in these 3 rounds, teams will continue to move forward as they go throughout the rounds in these matches that we'll be driving each Saturday. The bottom 2 teams will drop out. Then there's a last chance qualifier on November 2nd for the bottom 4 teams, and 1 team into the grand finals on the 23rd and 24th of November.
So, and for those teams that are going to have to position themselves in that last chance qualifier, why is it so important to take these first rounds seriously then?
Get a head start. Here's an opportunity for you to get out of that position. You don't want to be down there. You don't want to be racing and gasping for air.
Yeah, we all kind of need a little air in our life, whether it be in tires or in our lungs. But as far as the actual rounds themselves, let's take a closer look at what you can expect from that, because an entire round will be spanning over 2 weeks' time. So what are some of kind of the nuances that happen with that?
I think you can see here that one of the teams from match 1 today is going to move on to match 2. That means they're going to drive more than any other team today. So it's a little bit of an endurance test. They're going to get a little bit of, they're going to get a lot of seat time, which is great. But look what happens in a week from now. It's brand new cars, it's brand new teams. So that winning team from today moves to next week driving entirely new cars.
And considering that somebody does move on from match to match, whether it be the same team or a different team, why is that so important for the teams to keep in mind throughout the round?
It's an opportunity to race against every team. In every car combination, experience matters, especially for some of the underdog teams.
As far as what we're going to get to witness today, it's going to be our first 2 matches of the round, but first up is match number 1 with all of the tracks already laid out for us and the teams themselves too.
Teams are there, the tracks are laid out. I love this track lineup. There's a little bit of high-speed cornering in Silverstone, some high-speed circuits like Hockenheim, and then a little bit of both in Catalunya. So remember, they take these cars. We'll talk about cars in just a moment, but cars are throughout this entire day of competition. So all the choices they make make matter for every different race.
Of those first 3 tracks that we're going to see in match number 1, is there any in particular that you're looking forward to most?
Hockenheim, the bumps, it's going to test the cars. I'm looking at Nordkurve, turn 1.
I'm down to be in for a bumpy ride during that track. But we did mention that we're going to talk about the cars, so let's learn some more about the divisions that we'll be seeing throughout the series, because each week features 3 themed car divisions, and it's up to the teams to decide who will be driving each car for all 3 of the match races. Now, with the variance in selection, not just across divisions, but within them, how do you believe that these teams are going to approach this decision?
Well, what's interesting here is this is a bit like multi-class racing, but not like ABCs like you'd see it in Forza Motorsport 7. We're talking about divisions here. One other point we should point out is that these are divisions as defined by Forza Race Championship, not by Forza Motorsport 7. So you might see some cars that aren't existing in-game in their division. We've done that to create a little bit of more competitive evenness throughout the competition. So these cars are matter. When you talk about the cars and tracks having to go a single driver in a single car throughout the series, they have to make these choices early, turn in these choices. It's a lot to take into consideration.
And selecting the cars is one part of that process, but selecting what driver will be piloting each car is a whole nother aspect. So when it comes to the coach and what they have to be considering here, what are some of those characteristics when you're thinking about the driver and what to pair them with?
That's the driver's choice. To me, put me in the car I want to most feel comfortable in. That's my style. That's the way I would do it.
I don't know, you think about a track like Hockenheim where you need that high speed for that long straight. I'd be willing to get out of my comfort zone a little if I'm driving the right car on the right track.
I do want to make sure we give you all that are watching a heads up on some of the other aspects within the series, which includes the boost aspect that really comes in the 2nd and 3rd races of a match. But how does this really factor in overall?
The race is going to change. It's going to develop, and things are going to look different after the first race. There's 3 different ways that can happen. I'll start the hard charger. Every round, there's going to be a boost grade out there, available. Someone's going to have the most overtakes. Can you get the hard charger?
When you think about the strategy there is you want to maybe start at the back so you have the opportunity to get the most passes to earn that boost. The next one is a clean sheet. This is straight penalties. This is no penalties in Forza Race regulations, no penalties from the adjudicators. If you get a clean sheet and it has to be across the entire team, you have that opportunity to earn a boost.
Interesting things about aspects like perfect form, for instance, where they can gain additional aspects based on coming into sequential order across the finish line. So when you're an individual driver, you're not always thinking about the right. You're just thinking about the finish line and wanting to get there. Yeah. But now this is something that could benefit your overall team. So when you're kind of trying to think of, this is what I prioritize as a driver, this is what I prioritize as a teammate, how do those ideas potentially clash within the competitive climate?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that we'll answer today. I think it depends a lot on coach personality here. How much are the teams listening to their coaches who are giving those orders like, guys, we have to be in 4, 5, 6 here to earn that boost. Somebody's got to give up a position. These are exactly the kind of questions that are so fascinating we want answered today.
And maybe we'll get a chance. I know we get to interview some coaches later on too, so much to look forward to. But I think it's time we get to know the drivers and the coaches that we'll be following throughout today's broadcast. Starting with our first match and first team, it's going to be Rise Motorsport, which comprises of Renault, Chris, and Coach McQueen, who in this case will be subbing in for Renault. So with so many notable opponents in the very first match of this entire series, how do you think that Rise Motorsport plan on making their mark?
Deepest roster in the Forza community. So I imagine their decision for which drivers was the most difficult across this entire field. I already have concerns here with that swap McQueen in. Chris, I'm not sure his ability to speak English.
And that's going to matter because McQueen, who is a coach, was brought in with the Rise Motorsport team as a coach, is now driving today. So not only is he responsible for his, results on the track, he's got to communicate to the team. One of his team members doesn't speak English. It's a lot to overcome in the first week of competition.
And speaking of the coach stepping in for a driver with our first team, our second team shows that you can have a lot of interesting choices made with your coach selection to begin with. Because this is Roadrunner, Mitch, and Seven for Williams Esports with their coach Harmonic, which, considering all of the priority characteristics you think of with a coach, isn't it pretty interesting they went with Harmonic specifically?
Oh, absolutely. I'm concerned about their ability to come together. This is a late decision. I know Roadrunner and I know Mitch. They work really, really close together, and Seven's there as well. And Harmonic coming in so late, I'm wondering how much of a part he's playing in the team decision.
It's 4 people with very strong opinions. They're all going to have opinions on what they do with their cars, where they start in the race. I'm not sure if they'll need to quickly congeal and make sure that harmonic is part of this decision-making process.
So that's something for everybody to look out for. Which teams adapt quickly and which ones end up letting that individuality overtake the team itself. Well, we have 2 more teams to introduce. Our next one is another strong competitor in Lazarus, which is Force One racers Rossi and Coach Rosso. With teamwork being such an important factor in this series, what is it that Lazarus has to offer in the chemistry department?
They were built for this.
A+ in chemistry.
When teams were announced, I imagine they were probably jumping up for joy. They had to have been.
They're incredible. These guys are best friends in life. They just hang out together. Even though they're on live in opposite continents, they're always hanging out. They're always driving together. We're speaking specifically of Force One racers, but let's not overlook Rossi, who is a savant at FM7. There's few people in the world who know more about the cars and how they work than Rossi in this game. They're going to be looking to him as a leader on this team.
Quickly, note their coach Rosso does not have the same experience level in Forza as everyone else. Could be a factor.
But it could also be a deadly combination, having the 2 best buddies with somebody with such a high intellect within the racing community all on the same track. But they're going to be sharing that track with our 4th team here in match number 1, which is Fast Racers Forza. And this is Handicap, Tesla, and Bull with their coach, Solo King. And I have to say, is it safe to say that this is the underdog team out of all of these rosters?
I'm already scratching my head. I'm looking at some of the builds that this team put together. And if we want to call them an underdog, that's fine. You want to root for an underdog. But don't do it to yourself. I saw some parts in there, particularly a flywheel, I'm not happy with.
I can hear Solo
King. You don't like the flywheel?
No, it does nothing.
He's got something against flywheels. I don't know what it is, but I can hear Solo King right now saying, guys, ignore flip mode. Race your race, do your thing. We've done the right thing. That's what a coach is for.
And that's one thing they actually have to build, though, is getting the drivers to listen to them with that authoritative nature that comes with the coaching role. Some might make it a bit more dynamic. But before we end up going to the casters themselves for these races, I just want to get final thoughts from y'all going into the first match.
Hey, look for the boost upgrade. I really think that's going to be a huge factor, not so much in race number 1, but in race number 2. Who gets it and on what car?
And I can't help but look at this Williams versus Lazarus match. I mean, 2 heavy hitters, 2 favorites for the entire season going up in the first match of the day. Don't want to discount FRF and Rise, but all eyes on Williams and Lazarus.
If you had to pick one between Williams and Lazarus, though?
For me, it'd be Lazarus. It's that chemistry that we talked about earlier. It's the fact that they have Rossi sort of leading the way with car choice and builds. This guy knows the game. Rosso, I think, is a good person to sort of calmly keep them going. I think they've got the total package.
Do you have a specific team that you're looking to vie for that number 1 spot?
Number 1, it's tough to argue against Williams and Lazarus. Quickly, I'm looking at Rise today. I want to know what this sets the table for the rest of the season.
All right, well, I think it's time to get the season.
Fala aí, galerinha, beleza?
Bringing
E aí,
us
se
the
quiser
action
alguém
throughout the
vir aqui
entirety
pra
of
gente
today's
comentar aí
races, we
sobre
have a
o
lovely casting duo between
ForzaRC,
Ali and
sobre as
Jay.
corridas
So,
que vai ter
casters,
hoje aí.
take it away.
Fiquem à vontade, me dá um toque aí que eu convido aqui pra gente fazer os comentários. Eu não vou traduzir a corrida hoje porque, cara, meu inglês ainda eu tenho que dar uma aperfeiçoada, eu não consigo falar perfeitamente aí o inglês ainda. Estou trabalhando isso daí. Eu falo bem japonês, castelhano, arabiano, eu sei falar bem brasileiro também. Então, galera, entrem aí se vocês quiserem aí. Web Falco. Tamo junto. Eu vou chamar o Overboost, eu vou ver se ele quer vir aqui pra gente ir comentando enquanto vai passando a corrida. A gente não pode tirar o áudio totalmente da transmissão, né? Vamos lá, ó. Catalunha vai ser o circuito que eles vão correr. Acho, sei lá, não entendo direito de RC, nunca participei do RC, mas eu vou chamar o Overboost aqui pra gente ver as corridas, beleza?
And what Formula One often uses for their pre-season testing because of the long straights, it's great for high-end speed, but also you've got those turns that you really have to watch out for. Think turn 4, that's the Repsol turn, Marc Marquez's home. This track, which was built as part of the Summer Olympics in 1992, it was finished in 91, it has been a site for racing racing ever since.
It's an incredible facility, and I think a great place to start off our season. If you had to call out one place on this track, Shay, where you think you're going to see some action go down, we're going to see some overtaking, what do you reckon?
I have turn 1 for sure, at least for the start of the race, but don't count out that final turn 16. It's a long, sweeping right-hander, and that's an opportunity to get a good run out onto the front straight, and the start-finish line isn't right there when you get there, but you don't have enough time to make the full run down the straight to make your move.
Well, you mentioned there, it's a long old run down to the first corner here at Catalunya, and a few of the teams we're seeing picking some cars, putting them on the grid. I think especially there's a Ford GT up there.
Yeah, we've got McQueen for Rise Motorsport and a Ford GT up near the front of the field. He's not going to be there for very long, though, because that car with some Aguiras right behind, he's going to be back in 5th or 6th before they're done with turn 1.
A little bit tough off the line with that Ford GT. So maybe trouble for McQueen coming into first corner. We'll see. It's going to be an exciting first race. We're going to be getting on there any second now. Before we get in there, though, Shay, a prediction? Can I trouble you for one?
I'm in pink today. I think Lazarus is going to be a strong team to beat.
There you go, Lazarus. Let's get onto the track and down at Catalunya. They're running down towards turn 1, and we're on board with that second place. Koenigsegg whipping past the Ford GT just as Shay Adam predicted. And we're tight and into turn 1. Williams Roadrunner begins 2019's Invitational Series in the lead. Perfect for the Williams squad, and already relegated down to 4th place. We're on board with the top runner from RZM. What do we know about Chris?
Well, right now we've got 4 different teams in the top 4, and it is Chris that we're on board with.
Big old slide. That's Rossi off the track there at 4. Sorry, Shay.
Oof. That is not what you want to see, especially if you're a Lazarus fan. Though Chris is a 23-year-old from France. He was 30th in the world last year. Right now, he's sitting in 2nd. Make that 3rd, make that 4th.
Make that 4th. Williams, Mitch. I don't know what he had for breakfast this morning, but Mitch has absolutely just slung it up the inside, and that's a little tap. Tesla with the slide, catches the car, but it's still going to lose the position to Chris. I wonder if that'll be an adjudicated moment there.
Yeah, that should be. Chris, who's normally known for being a bit of a lone wolf, new to working in this team formation. This will be a total learning experience for the Rise Motorsport driver, but now right behind him is McQueen, his teammate, so maybe they can work together.
That's right, we're hopping back on board with McQueen running in 4th place. Of course, listed as the coach for the Rise Motorsport team, but out here as a driver, replacing, I think, Renault in this first round. And McQueen's somebody who's really no slouch, Shay, in his own right.
No, another 23-year-old, but this time a young American driving some American muscle in the Ford GT. His favorite driver, interestingly enough, is Williams Mitch, who he's on track with right now in the same kind of car. So it's going to be interesting when the two of them get together, but it is Williams Mitch who leads lap number 1.
Well, McQueen listing Mitch as his favourite driver. I don't think he's going to get any special treatment by Mitch out there on track. It's a bromance, but they'll still want to beat each other up in the lead of this race. We've got 2 Williams. How did that happen? Williams Mitch up there in the lead, swapping places with Roadrunner, and that Koenigsegg perhaps backing down towards 3rd place. We're on board with him right now, 3rd place runner from Rise Motorsport, to play rear gunner here. Are we seeing some team tactics with the Williams squad?
Yeah, and team tactics also for Rise in 3rd and 4th. So that's interesting to see how those 2 teams, the cream has risen to the top so far. It's still early days yet, but a lot of teamwork going on between Rise and Williams. I think we expected to see that, though, Ali.
Well, I will say, I'm expected to see Chris up there a little bit higher from RZM. He's had a little bit of extra PI spend put on him, a few more car parts put on his Aston Martin GT3, but it hasn't paid off so far for the Rise Motorsport team. In fact, 2 of the drivers who really they've had a little bit of a budget round here are ending up leading the way. So here we are on board with Chris in 9th place. Not the ideal start, Shay, but actually a good time to maybe get inside of Chris's head. What's he thinking right now if he needs to do better in this race?
He's another one of those 23-year-olds, the whole Rise Motorsport team, the same average age. That works out really nicely for us people who aren't very good at math. But he is somebody who loves this circuit. This is his favorite circuit, and he's always very hard to race, but he's often overlooked, and that's actually what's going on right now. His 2 teammates up there battling for the lead, trying to get around Williams. But then you've got Chris back there who's just sort of doing the lion's share of the work, battling with the other cars in the light category. Forza GT, I'm shocked that nobody went for the Corvette. Just have to say, that's the most successful car in IMSA right now in terms of the 3 that were available with 16 wins. But everybody went the way of the Aston Martin.
All the teams choosing the Aston Martin. We may see a Dodge Viper later on today, but not in this first matchup. We just saw a change for 4th position there. Koenigsegg of FRF Tesla sneaking on by RZM McQueen. So McQueen perhaps showing a little bit of rust he wasn't expecting to race this week, as we've already mentioned, and that's a tap, a movement across in the braking zone there from Tesla. I wonder, is that altogether legal?
No, and that was at turn 4, that corner that I warned you about at the start of the show, just missing the braking point, and from 4th all the way back to 11th for FRF Tesla. A young Brazilian will not be too happy about that, and another thing he's going to have to watch out for, his declared enemy.
Cara, deve pesar uns 10 mil quilos a mais que o outro, entendeu? Uns 10 mil quilos a mais que o outro. Daí, ele tem que frear antes, o cara que tá atrás, velho, tem que frear lá também, tem que tomar cuidado, velho, tá errado isso daí, entendeu? Primeira coisa que eu falo aí, ó, RC, melhora essa organização.
Eu acho que assim, ó, escolheram os carros errados pra pista errada.
Não, escolheram os carros errados pra pista errada.
E essa pista ia ser maneiro, um carro de tração dianteira, mais fraquinho, que tenha os cotovelos legal de fazer.
Não, prejudicaram totalmente a FRF, velho. Totalmente.
That's right. I will say, so
Jump Force pra dar uma testada.
To Mitch's car.
Ó, os meninos mandaram bem ontem.
Sim.
Boost and they can allocate their budget. That's at their discretion. That's their choice. But is it wasting it maybe? If Mitch is able to run and hide like this, could he have gotten away with less?
No, because it's all about how the cars wind up on the track. Right now, on board with RZM Chris in that Wyra, he's the only one in the class who's running that car as Williams RR goes a little bit wide through the exit of turn 4. That's a bit of a dangerous situation. It's all how the cards shake out though, Ali. It's not necessarily how you plan for it. It's, well, we need to plan for disaster, and then if it goes any other way, great.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I hear you. I get you. At the same time, it's going to be a nagging thought for me throughout this race. Could Williams have given Mitch less and gotten the same result?
I am one who would say no to that. But looking at 4th, there all of a sudden LZR Rossi is creeping into the picture. It's going to be a 4-car battle for 2nd, and then you'll see that I'm right, because once Rossi gets around everybody at 4GT, might be a little bit nervous.
We're back in 10th place with RZM Chris, the trailing member of the Rise Motorsport team. He's up the inside of Bull at the Kasha and makes that stick. It's going to be a little bit of a punchy move, but I think that's all rubbing and all fair in GT racing. You can get away with a little bit of argy-bargy in this class of car share.
Yeah, that was a brilliant move by Chris to just stick it down the inside of Bull, get the move done well before they get around the back half of the track coming through the stadium section. And now it's going to be up to Bull to try and get a better run out of that final turn as they go through 16. For Bull, it's a new situation. The 20-year-old from Brazil, he's got 8 years of experience playing this sport. But he's the kind of driver who will do anything to win. He's not necessarily somebody who follows the rules. So team sport, that's another new one for him.
Wow, you see Tesla there flying by. That's going to allude to something I was thinking about while watching Bull there, and that's that the FRF team haven't necessarily given him all of the resources he might need to succeed out here, running with a little bit of a cheaper car than Tesla, and Tesla showing us, well, the benefit of that extra expenditure on that straight. A huge amount of top end there for Bull's teammate.
Also, 2 very different cars. The Aston Martin set up to handle better through the twisty bits, if you will. And then, of course, you've got Tesla there, who's designed for straight line speed. I can go as fast as I want. Might not be able to slow down as well, but that's not what my car is designed for.
So, I mean, from your read then, is Tesla holding Bull up through the midsection of the track?
Yes, but you have to get around him in the twisty bits. And then he'll be able to pass you back up on the straights. They need to work together to take advantage of the different parts of the track where their car is stronger than their teammates, and then try to pull away from RZM Chris, which right now, not happening.
Well, it's 5 laps into the first race here of match 1 of the Forza Racing Championship Invitational Series. There's $250,000 on the line, and the cracks already starting to show in the Fast Racers Forza team. Andy called it out earlier on that there's some interesting upgrade choices going on with how they've built their cars, and now on track we're seeing perhaps some moments where a coach might need to step in and make some executive decisions.
I don't know if they're listening right now, though. I think it might be a situation where Andy called it earlier on. They're going to take their headsets off and not pay attention to what the coach is saying.
Here we are on board with that 4th place runner. You called it out earlier on, Shay. It's the top driver from LZR, Rossi.
Perfect example right there of the Ford GT just lacking that pace, as RZM McQueen could not stay with Rossi down the straight. That's what happens when you've got 2 cars that are set up for totally different advantages. The hypercars are built for straight line speed, whereas the exotic cars are built for a little bit more fun than that. They're supposed to be good everywhere.
Wow, so the Koenigsegg there with the twin-turbo 5-litre V8 showing all of its 947 horsepower on that straight and whipping on by the Ford GT with almost 300 horsepower left. We're hearing a 5-second penalty has been given to, I think, McQueen in 5th place. So we'll see that at the end of the race, and that'll be because of contact with other cars. So McQueen, if a few of you guys watching on may remember from 2018, McQueen got in his fair share of trouble throughout that series, and well, he's back on form here in 2019.
Yeah, and it's not a desirable situation for McQueen. Didn't know he was going to be driving in this until, well, about the last minute. But up at the front of the field, we have now completed 6 racing laps. Williams has led all of them, whether it's been Mitch or Roadrunner in that beautiful Ford GT. Mitch leading the way right now. He has pulled out quite the gap over his teammate. For Mitch, this has to be a complete confidence-building session. He's a mechanic in real life, and he's clearly mechanicked his way to the front of this one.
Absolutely. Really showing his personality there, Mitch, and putting down the lap times that his team need. We should talk, though. There is an elephant in the room here, Shay, and that's the difficult 3rd child in Williams' team. 12th place for Williams 7. After his teammates going 1 and 2. I don't know if we can hop on board and check out Williams 7. I wonder if he's carrying damage. I wonder what's gone wrong with his race. Either way, Shay, put me inside of that headset. Where's he at?
Well, for Williams 7, it has to have been something that resulted off the start, because racing in the Aston Martin, the 2017 version that won the Blancpain Championship so many times over, he's a driver who emulates his favorite driver, Juan Pablo Montoya. That can go one of 2 ways. It can either go very well, and as he's done this year, win 3 races, or it can go not so well, and you think back to the NASCAR days of Juan just taking people out. I love Juan, so enough on that. But he's fast, he's hard to overshadow, hard to defend him when he's on the track, but he's often overshadowed by his greater teammates. You've got first, you've got second, and you've got last. So you've got great points, and no points.
Well, this may be an issue for the Williams coach. Behind all of the teams, there is a coach listening in, chatting them through the race, giving them all important track information and making sure that their drivers are giving the best they possibly can. For the Williams team, it's Harmonic, a driver who's very well known in the Forza community, actually ranked 21st in the world in 2018. So he's someone who knows his stuff, knows his way around winning, and may be able to give 7 here the words of advice that he needs in order to come back through this pack.
The 3 Aston Martins are right together, and Chris is having a hard time hanging on to his RZM machine, as Bull is looking hungry too. But to his credit, 7 has moved back in on the pack. Further up, Tesla for FRF still holding up the group that we were just looking on board with. So that car unable to pull away from the rest of the field in 9th place. They didn't spend enough points on that one.
It's how they distribute their points. Absolutely right. It's about, you got to differentiate the speed of your cars enough so they're not tripping over each other constantly on track.
Exactly. Last lap just begun, by the way, as we come near the end of this first race. Force 1 back in 8th. That to me is very weird too. Did the team not spend enough points on him?
Force 1 will be disappointed with an 8th place run. He's got a little bit of upgrades to the brakes on that Aston Martin, but not a huge amount else. So it's almost it's a pretty cheap car in terms of how much PI they spent on it. Last lap of the race though, we're coming around towards the finish, and Williams, an amazing performance from them. This is our first taste of team racing on Forza Motorsport 7, and well, Williams just showing that they've got the class here in this first matchup.
They certainly have been practicing the most. You can see that. They had the situation perfectly figured out for the start of this race. RZM McQueen, who has his hands full, he could very easily go from 6th to 8th if he's not careful, as FRF Handicap and LZR Force 1 right behind him. But it really has been Williams who played it perfectly.
They have played it perfectly. Back here with Force 1 through this last sector. He's got a little bit of a chance here to perhaps find some victory from the jaws of his 8th place defeat. I think for Force 1, 8th place might feel like defeat. Racers coming through past Rossi there a little bit further up the field. So Lazarus doing okay with a couple of good moments. But it is Williams Mitch who's going to take the win here in race number 1, followed across the line by Williams Roadrunner. Those two will be very happy with each other. Good old friends, the two of them. And back on form here in 2019. Awesome performance from the Williams team. RZM gave them a run. And Lazarus maybe left it a little bit too late, Shay, in a race that was really defined in the very early laps at the lead there.
Yeah, the lead never left the jaws of Williams. They held on to it and ran with it. A lot of mixing it up back further in the field, though. We saw FRM, Force 1, and Rise all switching back and forth between their positions. It bodes well for the upcoming races, particularly given that Barcelona is a unique track. Yes, we have straights coming up for the next two, but we also have a lot more high-speed sections, particularly at Silverstone.
Well, hold on. The next track we're going to go to, Silverstone, as you say, who do you think then is going to rise to the surface, if you like?
Ooh.
Is it going to be the Rise team?
Given the updates that we've seen so far, given the way that this first race panned out, it's Williams to lose. But as we've just learned, if you don't get it done on the start, you're just driving around for 3rd, 4th, 5th, all the way down.
All right, well, let's stay in the present and look at the results from that last race. It's been an interesting one. Just before we go and check that out, though, Shay, looking back at that race again, I think I want to talk about Forza, Fast Racers Forza, FRF. Yeah. I was trying to get it out of my mouth. It came out eventually, there. FRF, because we did see some very definite and, I guess, very definable problems with their strategy.
We talked about all three of their drivers over the course of the race. Wasn't necessarily for good moves, wasn't necessarily for the right reasons, but at least we talked about them.
Right.
That's a good start. I completely see what Andy was talking about, though. Why waste the performance on the flywheel? The Porsche was nowhere to be seen in that race, back battling well down the field, 8th, 9th, 10th sort of area. It doesn't make sense that they would spend the upgrade on that.
Well, it was Bull and Tesla, wasn't it, who were sort of fighting it out together, getting tangled over each other. Their third teammate, Handicap, he did a good job. I think finished a little bit further up the field and actually had a little bit of extra PI. So maybe they can learn from that. They can take away that, all right, if we kind of differentiate the pace of our drivers, if we do something a little bit different next time, we can get a different result.
But Ali, the problem was that they didn't work together. They were just on track together and they were interfering with one another's race. That's not the way that you win these things. That's not the way that you make it through to the next round.
All right. No, I hear you. I hear you. Let's jump on and look at Lazarus then, because the pink machines, you were repping them before the race. They looked so promising. They looked so big, but didn't really materialize there for Lazarus in the very start of the event.
No, but that was just the first race. We can't throw all the baby out with the bathwater just quite yet. That was just the beginning of things, but I'm very surprised at their lack of presence, particularly through the way that that race panned out. Perhaps Rosso decided their grid order a little bit off. Maybe they should have put Rossi up a little bit further. Maybe they should have put Force 1 further back.
All right, so putting Rosso on the firing line for that one, Shay. Wow.
No, I'm just saying that maybe it comes down to being as simple as you don't need your Aston Martin at the head of the field when he's going to wind up in the back anyway. Maybe you should just acknowledge that the fast cars need to be up at the front for the start, because if you don't do that, we see what Williams did. They just run off and hide.
Williams got so much right. They got so much right in that first race, and we have to acknowledge that. You know, Roadrunner really securing the lead early on in the race, helping Mitch through, maybe slowing down some of the leading pack a little bit. Yeah. Mitch comes on through, glides past, and Roadrunner's like, all right, you run, I'll stick back here and throw the punches. Those two work so well together.
That was exactly what FRF needs to look at, because that was the perfect example of teamwork. And ultimately, guess who wound up with first and second points? It's Williams. It's not any other team. There's no equal distribution there. The lion's share right now going to Williams. And yes, their team car did finish well back in the field. Probably going to wind up with 1 point,
7.
maybe for 7. that's also not going to appease Seven as a driver and as a human being, because you never want to finish that far down when your teammates are winning. But at least they figured it out before they got into the race.
There's so much to unpack from that first race. It's so exciting. Let's get back to Gabby and the analysts and really dig in there.
It is time to dig into this race. Yep.
Let's do some digging.
Doesn't make it sound as fun as it actually is when we put it that way. But there was a lot to unpack in that first race, because with all of the format changes and everything in full effect, you could tell how much these teams are trying to consider and balance in their head. So first off, I just want to know, generally speaking, if you're thinking about which teams you think would have performed better under those conditions and which ones would have struggled a bit more, how much did this line up with the results from the first race with your expectations?
You got to look at Lazarus. You know, Williams, they're going to get a safe driver discount check here. There's no penalties from what I saw. And
Do
you know who's not getting one?
driver discount?
You know who's not getting one? Yeah.
I take that as a no, because he didn't.
Yeah, probably
answer
not.
the question.
We'll just move on from that one.
Ask him what he drives.
Lazarus, though, I think each of them got a penalty.
Yeah, and Ali and Shay nailed it with that performance by Mitch and Roadrunner. Not only are these two of the fastest guys in the field, we saw them working together, which is great. I think that they were let down by Seven, and maybe Seven had an incident with another driver, but I still was looking for, man, Seven, here's your opportunity to make some passing and do a lot of overtakes and maybe get that boost. We'll see how it works out with provisional results and final results, but for the most part, Williams looked great.
And those are the moments that we're going to focus on first, is what Williams Esports was able to pull out during that first match, because there were certain passes and things, as we're about to see during these replays, that were very key to their overall strategy of not just trying to be the fastest. So, Andy, as we look back at those moments with Williams Esports, what was it that Roadrunner, kind of what we were just hearing from Ekberg over here, what did he do so well to try and prioritize his teammate at the front line?
We'll see that here in a minute. This is lap number 1, but I think that moment happens in lap number 2. But look at the start here. McQueen's going to move out. Rossi gets squeezed. Handicap. Great job to save the car and keep it on track in a really, really tight spot.
And you could actually, sorry to interrupt, but you could actually see right above there, Mitch actually making up places and getting closer to Roadrunner, and he's fighting his way up there. Handicap gets the worst of that moment right there. You got to think this is where McQueen is racking up all those penalties. He had over 5 seconds of penalties there, but you can see up front, Mitch working hard. There's 7 going on.
Well, and speaking of those different aspects, with everybody trying to prioritize the best line around the apex, but also with the passing that we're seeing going on, how do you feel that in those close quarters that we're seeing there, the performance has maybe changed because of those considerations?
It has changed, and let's not forget that this is the first race in Forza Racing Championship history with Forza race regulations working. So these guys are getting penalties for cutting corners, for making contact with one another. So the tricks that worked in previous seasons of ForzaRC, you will get penalized this time around.
And one thing that did happen early on, if we're talking about Williams, is he ended up getting a bit of a scrape that put him behind. And Chris on your screen right now also ran into a little bit of trouble during the mid portion of this race. So how did that factor in for he and the rest of his team?
He never had a chance to settle down. Earlier there, you saw McQueen punt as if it was 4th down, one of the FRF drivers, but there it is. Mitch crossing the line. He was a getaway driver. He robbed a bank, never looked back.
Now, you just mentioned McQueen, and if anybody has been following ForzaRC for some time, this may be a familiar name, right? And what reason is that?
Well, we don't want to lay too much blame here. I mean, he was the most penalized driver in ForzaRC in the previous season. He had a rough start here, but let's not forget, he's meant to be a coach.
Os caras é ruim de transmissão, galera. Os caras é ruim de transmissão. O combo de carros que eles usaram aí é estranho pra caramba, entendeu? Tem gente que gosta, sei lá, mas eu achei muito desproporcional, por exemplo, colocar um Koenigsegg com um GT ali. O Koenigsegg tem que frear 100 metros, 200 metros antes da frenagem do GT, entendeu? É por isso que aconteceu os toques, que teve os acidentes, que foi o caso do Tesla. Lá, ele teve que frear muito antes. Tá certo que o cara que vem atrás tem que tomar mais atenção para fazer a frenagem, mas os carros são propícios aí a causar esse tipo de acidente aí. Eu acho que é tanto o erro do piloto que bateu no Tesla, como o erro também do pessoal que organizou isso daí, entendeu? Quem sou eu para falar, né? Mas Race Boy, vamos melhorar da próxima vez aí, se é que tá na sua mão isso daí.
early on how with Williams Esports in particular, the fact that Roadrunner was letting Mitch pass him. Later on within this race, there was a lot of that teamwork on full display as well, but it didn't pan out for everybody. So what happens when you end up putting so much focus on prioritizing that teamwork, but then it doesn't work out for you when there are other things that you could have tried to use to grasp it?
It's tough. It's what we were just talking about. It's so many factors that these drivers are taking into consideration. Do I let the driver ahead of me? Do I know who it is? Am I paying attention to that, or am I paying attention to my apexes? In this case, great job by Roadrunner. He understands Mitch has got the fastest car. He moves aside. This is a perfect execution of strategy on the track.
With all of the cars that we have in the divisions here today too, it seemed there was some more roughness compared to some of the other classes that we might see later on. So if you're looking back at the way that those interactions were happening when going around the corners, then Andy, did the vehicles take any part in that, especially with different vehicles side by side?
Well, I think, yeah, clearly the GT looked like it was a faster car right there, at least at that moment of the race. And Mitch certainly ran away with it. They had an easy drive, and no one else had an easy drive that race. Everyone else was literally trying to survive on that track when Williams didn't have to. Did the car choice make a big factor there? Maybe only for Seven's case, because he didn't have an opportunity to get back up into that field.
Yeah.
One thing that Ali and Shay had mentioned over in the casting booth too is they mentioned FRF a lot. It just wasn't in the way they might have wanted to.
Yeah, and we were looking at FRF and saying, look how close these guys are to a perfect form boost. I'm not sure they were aware of it because they had two cars bunched up, and then I believe it was Bull had to make up one position on a Rise member, and they would have finished 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever it was, and had that perfect form boost. But as you can see, one of them got around Force 1, or Force 1 got in between them, and at that point they had lost their capability to even get that sequential finish that would have given them a boost. In this case, I wonder if they're obviously valuing points. You have to value points, but sometimes these teams are going to have to think about what's good for me in race 2 and 3. Can I make it really count in the later sections of this series?
Because races 2 and 3, it is a collective match in the points determining who will be moving on into the second match of the day. Because remember, one of these 4 teams will be competing for a whole other 3 races later on. So looking back kind of at those moments, and you just mentioned where Bull had a lot of pressure on him to try and catch up because he was the isolated individual that was wanting to meet the rest of his pack. And it seems like that's going to be something we face a lot here. So Andy, do you think that maybe over time they're going to continue to try and focus on that and keeping that cluster? Or might it be something that's abandoned if they have these scenarios again where it just didn't work out?
I don't think you can make that call until the second half of the race. That opportunity first presented itself for FRF to get that perfect form bonus on lap 3.
Yep.
That's what I wrote down here. But can you maintain that? That's awfully difficult, especially when you have Lazarus around you.
And you have potential points available to you. Like, should I continue hard charging and go for these points? I think I agree with you. If it's 7 and 8, we're going to try to bunch up together. Lap 7 or 8, we're going to try to bunch up together. Lap 3, anything can still happen. The field is spread out. Let's try to get some points.
The thing is, we are going to have our next race coming up soon enough, and we'll have some things that we have to determine before that. But as far as coming to the coach perspective, because it is something we want to show that is very important, and if you're looking at teams where McQueen, for instance, stepping in, and then they have somebody else that's taking that coach role, how does that conversation then happen when he is stepping in ultimately for a driver, and this is only going to be a 1-week case?
Well, I have to think that was probably a choice that driver wasn't able to race, right? I don't think it was a strategic choice. I think that's the reason why the rule exists, so it can't be a strategic choice.
Yeah.
Well, guess what, everybody? We have race results for you, so it's time to find out how everything did shake out once those penalties have been enacted. So let's take a look. I think we have a feeling of who's in that top number 1 spot, and it's going to be Mitch, followed by Roadrunner, with some more trickle down, Chris, Rossi, and Handicap taking those 1 through 5 spots.
And Racer's there, the bottom of the pack for the Lazarus team. I wouldn't have guessed that. He's got all the pace in the world, but boy, tough.
He's got the most
race.
overtakes.
Yeah, he's got the most overtakes.
He's got 3. So he's getting the bonus. Despite not having a great race 1, the opportunity presented itself. I wonder if he didn't know that till now. I didn't.
That's always a good thing to find out later on. So as far as...
Oh, no, excuse me, Mitch. Mitch
yeah,
would
Mitch
get
is up there with
There you go.
9
right.
different position changes. But the thing is, that wasn't just all his doing. Roadrunner as well, letting him
That's
slide
right.
into that top spot.
It would have been 8.
Yeah, that one, nobody else really came
Everyone
close to
counts.
it
That's right.
so
That's
far.
right.
But as far as kind of the middle of the pack here, so Force 1, for instance, somebody that a lot of people had their eye on, and the rest of the Lazarus team, Rossi did come into that number 4 spot, though. So do you think the fact that there is enough of a spread in the middle of the pack is something that they would be content with?
I think they're happy with that. They have to be at this point. They know what they have to do. The other teams may be scrambling right now. If I'm FRF, I'm not exactly sure. If I'm RZM, I just got some penalties. McQueen had a tough race. Lazarus, I got the feeling they know what they need to do.
They do. And if you have to think about what is going to be happening in that next race from Lazarus in particular, what would you say?
Well, you see it right here. We were talking about racers just a minute ago. Look, he got 5 penalties, 5 penalties. McQueen's down there with a bunch of penalties. We saw what happened to him. These are the kinds of things that it's a new day for ForzaRC. FRF, Forza race regulations are in effect. These guys have to leave room for one another and avoid those penalties.
One thing to let everybody in the audience know, the times that we see on our screen are not quite accurate, so just keep that in mind when reviewing it, but still getting to see the actual standings of everybody here. So as far as some of the other teams go, and Tesla seemed to kind of run into some moments early on as well during that 4th turn that happened during the 3rd lap, dropping all the way from 4th to 11th and then ending up in that 9th place. So as far as getting that kind of just interaction that happens early on with it, do you feel that it was effective recovery from him in the end?
I think FRF's got to be happy with any points they take away here. Kind of like 7, like we saw 7 at the back of the pack. He finishes there with some points. That's a win for Williams. I think FRF's feeling good with the points they've got.
The biggest story here that we're missing is the hard charger award.
Yeah.
Mitch just got a hard charger award, and guess what? They just finished 1 and 2.
1 and 2 is a great place to be.
It's getting bigger and stronger. Are they going to run away with this now?
Yep.
Yeah.
They certainly put Lazarus on the back foot.
That's always the thing that you want to end up doing to your opponents here. So before moving on into the second race, I just want to get general thoughts. If you had to pick a team that you were going to give the ultimate advice to, who would it be and why?
The ultimate advice, I think I'd go back to, I'd go to the FRF team and say, listen, guys, we're the underdogs coming into this. We know we're going up against at least 2 of the best teams in this entire series. Let's keep it together. We had a decent result. Let's keep it moving.
Oddly, I don't want Rise to change their strategy. Why not mix it up at this point? You're clearly impacting Lazarus's strategy. You may not be able to make it out of the first round, considering Williams' fast start, but mix it up. This is your opportunity, week 1, find out where you stand.
I think what's hard here is that we had a dominant performance from Williams. They are set up to win race 2. If they don't win race 2, it's going to be a disappointment considering what we just saw. All the other teams now are saying, maybe you're right, we have to change everything because race 2, it could be over.
The thing is, there's only so much you can change from race to race, though. All of the cars that were selected per driver have to stick with that same selection throughout the entirety of the match. And some of the choices were pretty clear-cut across the board. Everybody went for the Aston Martin. So while we're waiting for things to ramp up into our second race, why do you think that this car ended up being so superior to the others in its category?
It's an attacking car. It's a car you can really throw into a turn, great on the brakes. It's a good car to make overtakes in. So that's why I see a lot of Aston Martins. Plus, it looks great. Got that picnic table wing on the back.
Yeah, and let's not forget, there's some good overtaking opportunities at Catalunya. So it's a great car for the right track.
But then why did people not go with the vet? No love.
It's
funny. I think that people were considering that a car that just didn't have enough power.
Yeah, it's not on the same pace. It's a good car in its own right, but the other 2 cars just offer more in different places, that being grip and acceleration, and the Corvette doesn't really excel in either of those.
So taking a look back at Williams, because they are our #1 runner going into the second race here, they do have a boost available to them. So if you're thinking about what's to come, you have your boost available as far as the track and when you're starting and things like that. What do you believe, in your opinion, is the most effective way to use the boost?
I don't know. It's funny because you could use it on Silverstone, but you could save it for Hockenheim. These guys can use this boost in any race in this match. So they can use it in race 3 as well. We know that Hockenheim is a power circuit. Use it on that long straight going down to the hairpin. Get some extra HP to make that count.
Why give your opponent a chance? Crush him now, right? Okay, you don't know what's going to happen in race 3, but if you can give yourself a head start now in race 2, I say use it.
Put your foot on their neck.
Tough call. I mean, for this early in the season, I think Harmonic and Roadrunner, we'll see if they work together here. As I think Roadrunner, I would say, is the superstar on this team as far as decision making, but use it now.
Yeah, and the format that we have, because we have mentioned it before, and I just want to make sure everybody's following. So you have your first match, right, with all 4 teams. One will be moving on into the next match. But the thing is, they only get to use the points from their highest scoring match at the end of it within the round. So it's not like you got to just add them all up and then make that be what you get to go forward with. So it's an extra opportunity. And if you're going to look at Williams and the chance to try and put into that spot, I have to agree with you that maybe going and just trying to crush the competition for that early advancement.
Here's my counterpoint. They didn't have a boost in race 1. They ran away with it. I would try the same thing again in race 2, and I've got my wild card in race 3 in case I need it.
Wild cards are good too. So with the perfect positioning, I just want to go back to that note of it because we saw so many teams really prioritize it, really close to the board. And then on this next track, thinking specifically, pulling into your expertise about the track in general, will this be more difficult or easier than the last track to try and really pull off that sort of positioning?
I think it all depends on the start. I mean, that's the case with every race. Things are going to shake out after those first few corners. The cars are going to spread out a little bit, and then these coaches are going to have to make decisions for their drivers. Can we, with an overtake or two, get into this position to get this perfect form boost? If not, I don't see anyone ever falling back to make it happen because those points really matter. But it's, to me, you can't make that decision in the first lap. It's a decision, as we were saying earlier, that comes later in the race when you realize we're probably not going to make up any more positions. Let's get something from where we are.
Silverstone does offer longer straights, so there's time to make that quick decision, believe it or not. And there's a lot of hot and cold zones in Silverstone. Long straights, then you get in quick turns, quick sectors, and quick turns. So you can make that decision here on Silverstone. That's a tougher call to make at Catalunya because it's so bang, 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 next turn, next turn, next turn.
Yeah, and that's the thing, when you have those opportunities with the longer stretches and the chance to kind of really bring up speed compared to these where you're really having to focus on that navigation, then that's just a lot that you're going to have to consider with everybody around you. But we want to take another look at the match results themselves so that you all have an idea of where everybody stands after our first race of the 3 that we will be undergoing during the entirety of our match. So Williams Esports being in that number 1 spot that you saw with all the points accumulated, 39. Wow. That is a lot more than double from the second place team there. So that lead is pretty hefty.
It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot to make up. I mean, if 7 had done any better than he would, we might have been able to call this already. But look, there's Lazarus and Rise, just a point between the 2 teams. Rise has got to feel great about that position right now. At the same time, it's only one of these teams, Gabby, that are going to move forward to the next match.
Only one, but they have 2 more opportunities to try and make themselves that team for that spot. And it's time to get going with race number 2 of our match. So casters, Ali and Shay, bring us into some more action.
All right, that's one race chronicled into the weighty tome that's becoming the Forza Racing Championship. Shay, I'm liking team racing already.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. The strategy aspect really starting to pan out, but we've only had one track, one race, one place. We've only been to Spain. Let's go to England. Let's go to England's answer to Sebring. In effect, we're off to Silverstone International Raceway. Opened up in 1943, just at the end of the war as an air base, at least it was when the war started to switch. It was opened as a track in 1947, though, this 3.66 mile track. You've got 18 turns. There's a lot of opportunity to screw it up, but you have to think with these high-speed cars, Maggots and Beckett's, that complex, it's going to be close to flat out for some of these drivers.
Turn 1 here at Silverstone, Shay, in a sense, quite similar to Catalunya in that it's a right-hander onto a left, but a little bit of a shorter run. How does it compare?
That's about the only similarity between the right and the left. But yes, you have to have a car that is designed to go well through the rest of the track. Turn 1 almost becomes a bit of a throwaway here because it's so quick and you spend almost no time in it. This track really, it's complicated. It's convoluted. You've got 2 pit lanes. You've got so many grandstands everywhere. It's easy to get lost around Silverstone. And if you're not paying attention for even the slightest second, if you just get the tiniest bit distracted, you could find yourself off in the weeds.
Well, what changes now? I mean, when we look back at the last race, we've got maybe a little taste for the strategy, the sort of thoughts that some of these teams came into the event with. But now heading into race number 2, what changes and what stays the same?
FRF needs a win. We've got the same situation for Lazarus, but right now it's Williams' race to lose, and all eyes have to be on them.
Let's get down to the track. I can't wait to see the start of this one. Silverstone's a classic circuit and a beautiful place for racing. That run down to the first corner isn't a long one at all, and we're on board already with Williams Roadrunner, second place finisher in the first race. But remember his crucial role that he played in helping his teammate Mitch up through the order. Roadrunner already threatening Chris in that Pagani just up ahead, and just held behind for now. It's a little bit of a slow section through the start of this track as we wind up now toward the back straight and the run down towards Luffield and Brooklands. It's maybe a moment at the top end of this Koenigsegg can pay dividends.
It is, and up in third position, FRF Handicap in the Porsche, looking at the back of LZR Racers Porsche. So the two drivers in those Porsches trying to chase down the Ford GT, all in the same category, but very different ideas of which way to go.
All right, Mitch takes the lead. That fast Ford GT, we saw it already. Williams have invested a lot in this car. Back in their planning phase, they've put all sorts of parts on it. They need Mitch to bring home the bacon. He hasn't disappointed so far, but proof will be in the pudding, I suppose. I'm excited though by third place runner Shay. That's Handicap. We're back on board with them right now because FRF finally playing a role in race number 2.
Yes, and trying to fight down the two British drivers who are feeling quite at home and bringing home the bacon. I liked your little analogy there. But Handicap, 19-year-old Brazilian, he is somebody who is big into NASCAR. He pays attention to that. A very exciting driver to watch. Got to keep an eye on him. There might be a little bit of contact should he be able to make it up to racers. Both in the same car, both very different balance of performance for the two.
All right, hopping back to the battle just behind that battle for second, and we're on board here with RZM Chris. That's in the Pagani Zonda, the ailerons of that car, stopping it, and see those air brakes moving around all the time. Just stuck behind this battle as well as LZR Rossi, so the Lazarus team looking a little stronger perhaps here in the second race, with Rossi in 6th and Racers in 2nd.
It's a Wyron sandwich, as that's the only car.
Sounds crunchy.
Does sound a little bit crunchy, doesn't it? As RZM Chris trying to fight his way around the Agura ahead of him without opening the door to the one behind him, which is LZR Rossi, just waiting for an opportunity. Is the young Scottish driver. He's very quiet, but he does his talking on the track, and I think that's what Rossi's doing right now, Ali, giving them an opportunity to take each other out, and then he'll just sweep on through.
Well, let's remember last race at Catalunya, it was RZM Chris up against Williams Roadrunner in the battle for second, and that battle's carried on, taken through here into the second race. Chris now all over the rear of Runner. For my money, Shay, Chris actually in with a lot more of a chance, looking a lot more predatorial here in the UK than he did at Barcelona.
Very, very much so. It looks like Chris is more comfortable around this track perhaps than he was at Barcelona. He's a driver who favors the Nordschleife, so he's used to tracks that are a bit more complex. Silverstone definitely is a bit more complex than Barcelona.
I will say that the 3 tracks we'll be jumping to today, or in this first match at least, Catalunya, Silverstone and Hockenheim, kind of work their way up in terms of being tracks that require more top speed, more top end from the car. So it's interesting to see that Roadrunner's best run, in a sense, was Catalunya, and now under a lot more pressure at a track where the top end of that Koenigsegg can do its work.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be fast through the twisty bits. It's supposed to be fast in a straight line. So what have they done to that car to alter their performance that much?
Chris fighting for 5th now as well. LZR Rossi on the hunt behind, and we're hopping back to the GT battle here between Rise Motorsports Chris, not to be mistaken by Chris, and also Williams 7 up there just ahead.
Good to see Williams 7 back up in the 8th position after last race when he was quite bitter.
He seemed out of sorts. He was in the Twitch chat chatting about it and saying that he felt a little bit hard done by. Always a very vocal character, 7, and great that he's getting out there and spreading the good news. 11th place was the best he could muster after the penalties. He was actually 12th across the line. It's a penalty for McQueen that saw him promoted that one position. So anything is better than that, really, for Williams 7, and, well, he can't be, I guess, as unhappy with 8th.
Well, but Williams 7 never wants to be in that far down. He doesn't want to be below 5th, and he wants to be carrying his own weight. So Williams 7, even if he gets to that 7th position, which is 1 up from where he is now, not going to see that as a positive.
All right, lap 3 of 7 here at Silverstone, and Shay, how are these strategies playing out? Earlier on, we saw Williams really take command of the race, dominate it. Perhaps here in the second race, it's more of anyone's game.
It's a lot more equal, that's for sure, Ali. We've got 2 Williams up in the top 4, but we still have LZR, we still have RZE, and we still have FRF right there as well. So the points will be a lot more evenly spread at the end of this one, but as long as Williams walks away with the maximum amount of points from this race, they'll be happy. Right now, they have as many points as Rise Motorsports and as Lazarus combined.
What?
After 1 race, they have 35 points. The other two, 17 and 18 respectively.
Wow, dominance from Williams. Dominance.
Even my math is bad, and I can tell you that's 35.
Well, I think, though, I mean, from what you've been saying there, Shay, a team to watch here, and a team on the move, as Rise switch positions there between their 2 drivers. A team on the move in this mid-phase of the race. That's right, absolutely. I have that back, thank you.
Yes.
In the mid-phase of this race, though, a team on the move is LZR, and we look forward to Force 1. He's just come up through past Chris this lap. Yeah. We've got races in second, and I think Lazarus's chances here and hopes of beating Williams in race number 2 here at Silverstone really rest with Rossi running back there in 6th and looking to beat, I think if he can get past Roadrunner, if he can pass 4th place, Lazarus are golden.
2nd, 6th, and 9th right now for Lazarus. That's not good enough. They need to keep earning those spaces forward, but I don't understand what Rise was doing there with the pass and then the pass back between Chris and McQueen, because all they're doing is taking speed off of one another. Yes, they're in 2 different categories of cars, but work together, guys. If you do that, you can help benefit the weaker car in its weaker places.
Right, after you. No, after you.
Yeah, all you're doing when you're battling with one another is taking speed off of both of you. That's not helping.
Right. Here we are with the battle for the podium. The second 2 spots on it at least. Williams Mitch has run and hid just as he did in the first race. Brilliant to see, actually. But second and third is the battle we're on board with. That's races and handicap. Here we go. Here's Mitch. And well, we haven't really introduced this guy yet, Shay, but a very popular man in the community.
Yeah, he was the winner of the race the last time out. He was 3rd in the world in 2018 for the Forza ranks. His favorite car, Pagini's Honda, so I'm a little surprised that they chose to put him in the Ford GT since they had an opportunity to let him drive a Pagini, but perhaps that's just the way that Will Harmonic, the coach, is working. But for Williams Mitch, he had a meteoric rise to fame, but he ruffled feathers along the way, so perhaps it's good that they gave him all the help. You were a little upset that the Ford GT had all the help in the last race. Let him be out there by himself, because you know what? Nobody's with him.
Well, for all of you who remember Mitch 555 back in the day, hats off to you. That guy's come a long, long way, racing for the Williams F1 esports program now and winning races, leading races in the Forza Racing Championship Invitational Series. Remember, there's a $250,000 prize pool at the end of this after 6 weeks of intense online competition, a last chance qualifier, and then a LAN event. We're back, though, with Williams 7, the difficult 3rd child, I'm starting to call him, because he just is not performing like his teammates.
He's nowhere to be seen in terms of the blue cars. They're up at the front and then well in the back. And for Williams 7, he's in the 8th position right now. That might as well be last because the French driver wants nothing to do with that position. For the teammates, though, for Roadrunner, he's doing a very good job playing tail gunner effectively at this stage in the race, back in 4th position. He can't see the Porsches ahead of him, but he's not thinking about that.
Wow, look at the speed difference there. Tesla in the Koenigsegg up ahead in the first straight, just 5 car lengths on that straight every single time. So difficult to defend against when a car has more top end than you, Shay. It can be very, very difficult to hold them back behind, especially on the straight line sections.
Yeah, and it's surprising. We've only seen 1 penalty thus far in the race, now that I've said a commentator curse, so we're just going to have nothing but penalties.
Wreckfest.
But that was for Force 1 at the start of the race. A 3-second penalty will be applied to him at the end of it for a bit of rough driving at the start, which always is not encouraged by the green flag, but it certainly happens at the green flag.
Hey, look, we're GT racing today. This is a Hyper GT week. We've got cars that are built to take a little bit of rubbing, a little bit of knocking, and that's all well within the rule set here in this first week of the Forza Racing Championship Invitational Series. Keep in mind, we'll be switching the cars up in each broadcast, so come back next week and you'll see some different vehicles out there, and perhaps those will handle bumping in a different way. For now, though, a little bit of that is allowed.
Handle bumping in a different way, as in they don't
as in
handle
not at all.
bumping. Yes.
As in not a jot.
We were just on board there for a moment with FRF Tesla, who's a guy who's very quiet, but he does need that confidence boost. Well, being able to hold Williams 7 behind him for not just this race, but the last race, that might be the confidence boost that he needs to bloom into the driver that will make him truly electric.
FRF Tesla, we're running with him in the Koenigsegg here. It's always interesting to see how the slower, well, not the slower cars, but the heavier cars, the cars with less cornering grip, handle their way through these twistier sections of the track. Tesla biding his time and really waiting for the straight line sections where he can pin down that 900 plus brake horsepower of that incredible twin turbo engine. Looking back here from Rise Motorsports, Chris in the Pagani Huayra, and well, you can see behind Rossi still chasing, still unable to pass.
What's going on with Rossi? He hasn't been able to catch back up to Chris ahead of him to try and put a move on for the 5th place. Rossi needs to get around. He needs to get up further, because as it is right now, Lazarus not with enough points to really challenge Williams, particularly if they get 2 race wins on the bounce.
They can't afford to let Williams run here. They need to put a stake in the ground. They need to turn this table around. I've got to say, with 1 lap remaining after this rotation is complete, it's going to be, well, difficult to see anything other than Williams winning this thing and moving on into the second match happening here. I will say, Williams, though, a little bit of a strategic call helping them out in Silverstone. They've had a bonus build, the opportunity to give one driver a little bit of extra oomph on track. It's actually a camshaft advantage, and they've given that to Williams Mitch. I think I was calling out Catalunya.
Yeah.
Mitch is already flying. Why are you giving him more, Williams?
He's almost 11 seconds ahead of the rest of the field. Don't give him any more advantages. Help out 7.
Seven's your man.
7's not feeling the love right now. 7 needs a little bit of a confidence boost. Just throw him a chocolate bar at this point and help him out. He's back there battling for the 9th position as it is now.
It is a cold 9th position as well. It's chilly out here with 7. Harmonic, show this guy some love.
Well, and particularly since Force 1 has now gotten around 7, which is a Lazarus team member, that's who they're really fighting against to try and make it into the next round. Rise, yes, they're still in it. They're 1 point back from Lazarus, but it's been a better race for LZR than it has for RZE.
Well, the pack still very bunched here on the final lap. It never really split apart from, of course, the leader, Mitch, who's pulled some 10 seconds plus on the rest of the pack. Lots and lots of different types of car racing very closely. That seems to be the flavor of team racing on Forza Motorsport 7, that we see these incredibly diverse cars all on track in close proximity.
This is going to be a good points haul for Lazarus. Right now they're in 2nd, 5th, and 6th. This is what they needed, Ali. This is what we talked about at the beginning of the show. In order to keep hope alive, they needed a good points day. They're on par to get that right now.
Well, let's be real. Williams' weak link is 7, and Lazarus have got all of their drivers up ahead of him. 7, very much the target here for the Lazarus team. We can see them all spelled out, writ large on the page here for you. Races bottom left, bottom right. He's in the Porsche running in 2nd. Rossi continues to push in that Koenigsegg that he's never found his way up from 6th. And meanwhile, the final driver is Force 1 back there, I think, in 8th position.
Who does have a penalty coming his way. Remember the 3-second penalty for contact on the start. So he did need to get around 7, but if he doesn't pull out a 3-second gap, it's going to be all for naught.
All right, well, here we go. Back on board with Mitch, who makes it 2 for 2 at the Forza Racing Championship Invitational Series, taking the win here at Silverstone. We're back in that battle for 2nd, but I don't think there's a chance here for Handicap. He's maybe waited a little bit too long, and Racers is going to tuck away that 2nd place. Handicap with the bronze, And crossing the line there for FRF. But FRF, Shay, I think back on the map in terms of that mid-pack battle.
Definitely. They have staked a claim as to why they are here and why they belong here. There were some questions over the start of the tournament over some of the teams coming in. I saw it on the Discord a little bit earlier on. FRF was one of the teams that people were doubting. They just proved why they were selected.
That's right. And, you know, it shows as well that they're learning race to race. And with a long-term series like this over weeks and weeks, it's the teams who adapt, the teams who learn, the teams who take things from their defeats that are really going to be able to improve.
Yeah, RZM was the team to watch in the first race because they came out swinging so strong. 17 points after round one. They were 1 point behind Lazarus, who's the team that our casters have been, well, we've been saying that they're great. Our analysts have been saying they're the team to beat because they have the teamwork aspect down. You come out and you're that close to them.
Yeah.
That's a way to prove.
I will say, though, still, Chris in the Aston Martin for RZM, he's the one running the extra PI. So they're the one the team have really invested in. They've really built that car up and worked on it before the season started. And Chris hasn't really been performing yet for Rise.
No, that's been a giant gaping hole in their plan. And also, when you've got McQueen coming in and subbing so late, you can cut him a little bit of slack because perhaps he wasn't in the same mental space as the other drivers being prepared to go out for this. But there's definitely a vacuum there as to a coach, as to some clear decision-making going on. What the heck were those two guys doing battling each other out in the middle of the race? They could have had a chance to gain more positions if you just worked together.
That's right, and it just loses them time and exhausts them. But, well, we haven't talked about him yet, but Williams Mitch, Shay, what can we say? This guy is out here, he's winning everything.
He is emulating his favorite driver, Sebastian Loeb, who's a driver who goes out and does exactly that, wins everything, and nobody else even notices that anyone else is in a championship because it's all about Williams Mitch. So hopefully that's not going to be the storyline for the entire season, but so far, maximum points from Williams Mitch. That's all you can ask of him.
Incredible run from Mitch. Little Mitch 555, making it all the way up to the Forza Racing Championship. Great to see, and awesome for the community as well. You can see how when you're out there and you're learning how to race, you work your way up through the different series, the different community leagues, and find yourself eventually at the top of the big stage.
Do you remember him way back when? Is that what we're going to get into?
a little
bit.
So yeah, it's always fun to see. Shay, if you had to pick one driver in that race, who would you pick as somebody who maybe could perform better in this final one? Who can find a little bit of a silver lining coming into this last race?
Tesla. It would have to be Tesla because he really started out so strong earlier on, and then he just sort of faded back as the race went on. So that proved to be a situation that really brought attention to us. But Tesla should be competing further up, and instead he's fighting for 7th and 8th.
You know, I'm inclined to agree. And he's not someone we've talked about a lot as well. You find that people who really perform well or outperform your expectations are ones who, you know, they'll be in the spotlight. You'll chat about them all day long.
Mitch.
Like Mitch, right, exactly. But Tesla, maybe not shining. Playing perhaps a team game. I'm going to look at my notes here because Tesla, I mean, running the Koenigsegg Agera, but actually it's a Koenigsegg that FRF haven't really invested in.
No.
So they've kind of scuppered him from the start.
Well, yeah, but also you'd expect him to just be able to carry his own weight a little bit more, particularly when battling, because at one point we saw Rossi just drive clear around him and then set sail for a little while. So that was a bit of an odd situation. I'm expecting to see more of him when we get to Hockenheim, though, because that's a track that should be better for the Agera.
Well, you've spoken about just now Hockenheim, the third track that we're going to be heading to. What changes at Hockenheim? What's the difference, if you like, character-wise, between a track like Silverstone and a track like Hockenheim?
There are more corners at Hockenheim where you have to slow the car all the way down. So that's going to prove to be a difference. We've seen cars that are great in the straight line. They've got great top-end speed. But how quickly can you get it woed up? That's another issue, particularly for some of these hyper cars. They're designed to go really, really fast. They're not necessarily designed to slow down really quickly.
Yeah, and woed up, that's an engineering term, it sounds like.
That's a proper term. Yeah, welcome to America, buddy.
All right, here I am.
In the U.S. There you go. Welcome, Allie.
This is what happens at customs every time. They just give me a big old handshake. Let's dig in a little bit deeper with what's going on, what went on in that second race, and pass over to the analysts.
Thank you so much, Andy. We're back at the analyst desk. Tigris here with Meckberg and with Andy. And in the end, this was a very different style race compared to what we saw in race number 1. So how was it that Silverstone seemed to be a lot more calm?
Well, you're right. It was completely different. the first few corners of the race number 1 were kind of chaotic. We saw a lot of penalties awarded early. And this time around, I think maybe the drivers got a little nerves out of their system. They realized that the flowing turns of Silverstone, it behooves you to keep that speed, that momentum up. They drove a much calmer start. It starts with the start.
Yeah, I'll say it. It was clean. It was fair. Was it exciting? No. But maybe you're right. Maybe that was Silverstone. But no, certainly not the excitement level of race 1.
And because of that, we didn't see as many passings or overtakes or anything like that. And Mitch, talking about Williams, they are clearly in the number 1 spot coming from the first race with 39 points compared to 18th in the second spot. But Mitch achieved 9 different overtakes during the earlier one, very different style, but still coming in first place during race number 2. So even though he had the same exact finish, what was different about his style of racing on this second track?
Mitch is confident anywhere he goes in any car. He loves a track like Silverstone, and it showed. You know, we talk about 2 wins in a row and it being astounding and it being incredible and what a start. This is what you would expect from Mitch in pole position. You would expect him to take that
he's
car
had an
and go
easy
away.
drive.
Yeah.
He's had an easy drive. What about his teammate 7?
Yep.
That poor guy's been left behind. I called Mitch a getaway driver, like he robbed a bank. Well, he just robbed the bank at Silverstone, and he left 7 stuck in the vault.
And we see the comments in chat of people saying, hey, 7's been a bit maligned here. He had a tough race 1. He actually was in the very back of the pack, and he came up and made up some places. So he hasn't had a great start. He's doing his best. This is a guy that lets his emotions get the hold of him. He's staying calm.
He's got to remember, it's a team.
Yep.
It's a team. His team's in first.
And that's the thing. We've talked about the emotional aspect of these drivers. Some have more of an ability to keep a calm, cool, collected head than others, but it's difficult when you're in a team environment. You're always never wanting to be the one lagging behind.
Yeah.
Clearly, we've seen that 7 is reacting a bit to that aspect and the consistency of being the 3rd place finishing in that. So what do you think we can expect as far as a turnaround in mentality to try and prevent that in the future?
7 could be a number 1 on almost any other team in this series. He is one of the fastest drivers in ForzaRC, no doubt about it. It's can he keep that mindset? Can he realize his talent and live up to that in every single race?
And one thing, too, speaking of 7, there was a particularly moment in lap number 7 where Force 1 ended up overtaking him. Force 1 did get a penalty early on for some rough driving, but still, in the end, Lazarus was performing a bit more collectively this time around. So just overall thoughts on their performance here with some more of that consistency in the teamwork.
They did enough. They're going to hold on to second place. I didn't see anything to see that they won't get that second place. I don't see them moving on. Clearly, this is Williams moving on in this match. Lazarus, it was their first opportunity. I thought this race would be closer. I thought race 1 would be closer. It hasn't. They got another match next week.
Provisionally, Lazarus is 2nd, 5th, and 6th. A great result. It's not going to be enough this time. Williams has to have some sort of DNF in race number 3 to not move on to the next match.
But speaking of not being enough, if you're looking at FRF, who doesn't look like they have a good chance of going and positioning themselves for a second match, but there are still some highlight moments that you have to consider. Handicap, for instance, really showing out. And we are about to see how all of those results ended up coming through after our second race of the day, because those are ready for you. And we'll see what the standings are. So Williams Esports still performing very well with Mitch in that number 1 spot. And then Racers managed to get all the way into that 2nd spot. But Handicap, who I was just talking about, what was it that he did so effectively to try and bring FRF back into this conversation?
He held onto the back of Racers.
Yeah.
He held onto the back of Lazarus. I wasn't so sure that FRF could do that. I called him out earlier in the stream, and you know what? Handicap answered. The most important thing on here, look, it's the number of overtakes to position changes. Force 1. Would you think 2 would do it?
Yeah, that's right.
Would you think 2 would do it?
Yep.
Not quite.
One more thing about Handicap. You know, he started in 4th. He made up a position. Now, you are in racing amongst the Mitches, Handicaps, and Roadrunners of the world in this group of 4. To make up a position there is a fantastic finish for him. I think, you know, the guys over at the desk were talking about Tesla being the star of the race. I think we were all talking about Handicap the entire time.
And penalties are something that you really have to consider coming into this. So with Lazarus, for instance, Force 1 taking that 3-second penalty early on, not only does it affect your positioning here, but it eliminates one of the 3 ways that you can achieve a boost going into the next round. But overall, this wasn't as rocky of a ride compared to the first one, so it doesn't seem to be as much of a factor.
Hockenheim may change that. I suspect it will. The curbs are going to play a part. They're giving the hard charger there. It said to handicap. I wasn't so sure the graphic was right. I thought I saw Force 1 with the hard charger. But if handicap gets it, and that's true, you know, there could be a mix-up here. I still think Lazarus has done enough. But FRF, we called them as the underdogs. I'm worried about Rise now.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about Rise. There wasn't a lot of things to say about them. We were so focused on the dominance of Williams, especially expressed through Mitch, and Lazarus and FRF having very good races. Didn't see a lot of Rise there to even warrant mentioning, unfortunately.
Yeah, and with Rise putting that extra PI into Chris, but it wasn't enough. In the end, we'll have to see where they are in the match results standings right now. For the points accumulated, it's Williams Esports with 73 in that top spot, Lazarus trailing with their 44, 29 for FRF, and then Rise Motorsport with 26. So pretty tight between the bottom two, but in the end, that's not going to be relevant for who moves on.
It's going to be tough. I mean, you with a 1-2-3 finish, you're getting what, 46 points there. So that would be a good finish, but that would be assuming Williams has no points in the next race. So if Williams scores nothing somehow, if they all DNF and Lazarus gets a 1-2-3, then there's a shot there. But the odds seem pretty low to me.
Well, and in the end, even if you don't move on, your points are still very relevant because they do accumulate over the season to figure out who will be the finalists at that LAN. So, Andy, if you're trying to just pick up a few extra points here in the first match, even if you're in that number 4 spot as a team, then what are some of the effective strategies that you would plan to implement as a coach to try and just garner as many points early on within the Invitational series?
Rise, this is not going to be their best week.
Yep.
And they're in 4th place. So this round, it's all about Williams. Now, if I'm Williams, they want the most number of points in the match, right? It's very crucial. So this is a perfect opportunity for them to do that. Can't let off the gas if you're Williams.
Use the boost if you saved it. Now's the time, because you can't take it into match 2 with you. Everybody's going to be boosted out. Everybody's going to be running as fast as they possibly can.
And going into the third race that we'll have of the day, it is going to be over on Hockenheim. So many more turns and potentially going to get back to some of that roughness that we saw in the first match of the day. So when it comes to Forza, you get to play these back-to-back, right? And that makes a very different experience in having to change your strategy on track to track. So do you think that there's any interference mentally that might come from having had just such a very calm finish within that second race, going into something that can get a bit more crazy?
We'll find out right away.
Yeah, I mean, Hockenheim, yes, turn 1 at Hockenheim is very rough. The curbs Andy mentioned earlier are very rough. It's easy to get a car completely off the track and out of shape. Shay mentioned over at the desk the fact that there's heavy braking zones. There's a lot of areas for dive bombing, especially at the long straight at the end of the hairpin. You're going to see a lot of that. This is a very aggressive track that can reward very aggressive driving.
And of the drivers, I think I have some answers in my mind, but I just want to know who comes to answer first. Who do you think would be the roughest driver that walks out with the most penalties in the third race?
The easy answer is McQueen. Yeah. But he shouldn't change. I said it earlier. That's his style. Keep it up. I like it. They're actually climbed up. They're only 3 points ahead of FRF.
You know,
behind.
Shay and Ali were talking about Bull earlier on the FRF team, known as an aggressive driver. This is the spot where maybe he can take some of that and put it to good use.
But then some of the other drivers that aren't known to be as aggressive, they talked about it over in the casting booth, Tesla, for instance, who was, having a bit of a struggle, not just on the track, but, they didn't put a lot into his vehicle to begin with, and a very strong driver that maybe needs to build some of that confidence. So how does that end up getting masked when you're going against the aggressive drivers, whether it be someone like McQueen or even later on when we get other teams into the mix with the Lages and the Boxes that are known for that?
Yeah, I wonder if this is a case of the coach on the FRF team, Solo King, telling his men, Tesla and Bull, to lay off. Let this be handicap's race. Don't let anybody get by you and threaten handicap, because this is our star.
Well, I don't know. It's not really working. Bull's having a tough day. I think he's got 1 point.
That is really tough. But a lot of it came down to, if we're looking back to race 1 for Bull, where so much pressure was put to try and get that consecutive finish off for him, and then in race number 2, not really working out. So if we're going into race number 3, we talk about that mentality, we talk about the teamwork that has to go into this. Yeah. So how do you, as a collective, do your work to focus on your individual drive, but also keep that mentality in that collective space and use things like boost to your advantage?
Every one of these drivers is a different personality. We talk about about the extremes from Tesla to someone like Seven. Tesla, very calm, unassertive driver. Seven, hot sauce all the way. The guy is just hot and cold and mostly hot. Each one of these coaches has to deal with these drivers in a different way. It's a little bit of psychology here. They have to calm them down or rev them up depending on what they need to do in the race.
I expect a different race, okay? The reason why, no sense in getting sequential finish here. No sense in getting the most overtakes.
It's all about points.
I'm expecting more racing from the back half of the field at this point.
I do want to mention before we end up getting into the third race, which should be underway soon, we talked a bit about Force One and we talked about racers over on Lazarus, but we haven't given much note to Rossi. And I know you early on within the top of the show had said that's somebody that you should keep track of because of his high intellect within the game. So what do you make of his performance so far?
5th place in race 2. That's a good position for him. I still feel like he was probably supporting racers there in second, doing his best. And I think what you see, the success of Rossi is not on track. Yes, the guy has pace for days, but he is making the decisions on these car builds that pay off race after race after race.
Yeah. And ultimately, in the end, with not as much overtaking happening and the wider road that we just saw really influencing that in the second race. So as far as the style that we saw from some of these that like to keep it a bit more bumper to bumper, then Andy, what do you make of the fact that they were able to use that space effectively to kind of slow down the game in that kind of way of the race without as many penalties and stuff?
Well, I think it gave a chance, a perfect opportunity for the coaches and the teams to communicate with each other. I imagine the radio was probably really busy at Catalunya. And this time around at Silverstone, it was probably a lot more calculated and easy. And this may be an opportunity for Rossi to really punch those numbers together and Rosso to help him out and do that.
It begs the question, what do you think about Hockenheim? Where is that going to fall in that spectrum in terms of communication between the drivers?
You would think naturally in the middle, but I'm thinking it's going to be closer to Catalunya than it was the experience we had at Silverstone.
Especially with things like the way that hairpin works around that, and so much can happen in those very micro moments, especially early on. So if you are looking at the first laps and the way to approach that, if you do run into some of the turmoil that is very likely on a lap like this, then if you're looking at some of the very specific drivers of Chris and Chris, and I want to talk about McQueen again in that kind of teamwork collective, we saw early on where McQueen and Chris were able to have some teamwork here because of the breadth that was allowed with the nature of the strategy in our second track. So if you're trying to emphasize that early on where there's a lot more potential for that early clashing, then how do you really end up navigating and trying to prioritize keeping that teamwork in mind despite some of the heavy infiltration from the other teams if it happens in the early laps?
Well, that's the job of the coach. They got a sub-coach in. That's probably a big ask. Not expecting it. Late decision. Tough call for RZM to do that.
If I'm McQueen, I'm like, Chris, go be Chris. Go be the hot lap guy that can make things happen unlike anybody else on this team. Go after the points because that's all we've got left here.
Yeah.
I know that we do like to ask you guys some things in chat. So if you're tuning in specifically through Twitch chat right now, we'll have a poll for you specifically on the paint jobs that we're getting to see across all of our cars here today, because ultimately the looks that you're seeing on your screen were due to some artists that have put in the heavy work available to them. So who do you think is the most important painter that came through today? Answer that in the chat, but I'm going to ask you here on the desk, who do you think is the most important painter?
I love, we're coming right here to Force One. Force One is not just a driver, he's a painter. He designs these cars for Lazarus. I love that hot pink look. It's unmistakable on the track. Great looking car.
He painted a vet though. No one even brought the vet. What's he trying to fool me? He's not fooling me.
Yeah, that's just a smoke screen.
You gotta look stylish no matter what, if it's here in the competition or not. So if you were given the opportunity to paint your ultimate vehicle within Forza, what would be some of the key aspects, whether it's colors, the design itself, what would it be?
For me, I love the race replica look. I love, we were talking earlier about how they put the fake companies sometimes on the stickers. I love that look. To me, it's classic motorsport. It looks amazing.
The easy ones. Some of these cars aren't easy. Trying to get
the vans.
The clipping or whatever. It'll throw you through some, the vans. I'll take the van.
Well, don't forget, everybody that's watching, to go ahead and vote for who you think is the most important painter here. You can do that right in Twitch chat if you're watching from that platform. But any last thoughts before we go into race number 3 of the match?
Williams, make it home. Bring it home, guys. You were most likely moving on. Let's set yourself up for match number 2. Get ready for the rest of the races you have to run today.
FRF, they showed me something. I called them the underdogs early. Show it to me again. You're not moving on, but here's an opportunity. Prove yourself. You belong here.
We're one race away from knowing who will be moving on to our second match of the day. So once again, let's send it to our wonderful casters to call the action.
All right, welcome back to the desk, or as I like to call it, Area 51 Central, tinfoil hat o'clock here. I've been conspiracizing here on the desk. Right.
Are we being raided?
Come again?
Are we being raided?
We're being
for Area 51.
currently being raided by Area 51. Being raided by the Williams team on track, if anything.
Yeah.
Right. Here's my conspiracy theory, right? Williams are giving away all of their best strategy right now. They've race 1, they've come out of the blocks, they've worked on all their stuff. They're giving their A game away to everyone who maybe other people are holding stuff back. They're like, oh, we've got better strategies than this, but we know we don't need to use them until it counts, until the end of the competition.
Yeah, I'm in for that. But
Discuss.
race 3, it counts. And we go off to Germany. I hope you brought your passport because we've already been to Spain and England. Now we're off to the Hockenheim Ring. This circuit, which was opened in 1932. Yes, that is correct. Way back when. Iconic turn, 16 of them, and just a tick under 3 miles. So again, a circuit similar to Barcelona in length. We're running the full thing today, so it's 2.84 miles. You've got a brilliant hairpin for overtaking opportunities. That's turn 6, but it's the end of the lap. If you were watching the German Grand Prix this year, you saw the rain, you saw people sliding off the track at that final turn. That is where we're prone to see a lot of misfortune coming the way of other drivers because other drivers are getting in their ways.
Yeah, no, right, absolutely. And it's a track which, yeah, lets cars go side by side. We've seen that. The hairpin here is notorious on Forza as a place where you might see 2 wide, you might see 5 wide going into it. There's lots of space and lots of room for overtaking. But it's also a track, I think, out of the 3 we've raced today, which emphasizes top speed more than anywhere else.
For sure. And also, we talked a little bit about it. They talked a little bit about it. Braking is pivotal here. So when we go into turn 1, we'll have to see who comes out of it. And first, I don't think it'll be the Ford GT.
Okay, the first turn here at Hockenheim is the Nord curve, and it's a little kink to the right-hand side. Very difficult to make it through there side by side. So what better way to start the race than by putting all the cars side by side and heading them down towards that corner. Here we are, Lazarus around the outside. It's Force 1, who's getting a little bit tangled up there in 7th. Runs it wide, comes back onto the racing surface, hopefully won't pick up a penalty for that track extension, but will lose out on a whole host of positions. His teammate Rossi's through, and McQueen.
There should be no penalty there, though, because it was McQueen, who's still being very forceful, allows Chris to get through, pushed Force 1 out wide through that turn 1 area. That wasn't Force 1's choice to cut the track. That was the only place he had left to go.
All right, McQueen here back on board with him. Lots and lots of top end on the Ford GT and making up some positions on the straight, positions which hopefully he won't spoil with a penalty later on. 9th place right now and looking strong with his teammate just up ahead, Chris. Could be a chance here for RZM to really put their flag in the ground in this 3rd race.
All 4 teams are up in the top 4 right now.
Wow.
No, make that... Wow, we've got a lot of mixing up going up further up the field as Racers and Rossi are now together. All 4 of the teams coming into this race had boost upgrades. So all of the cars are different than the last time we saw them. That's the good news as they come into the stadium section of the track now. Williams-Mitch still leading the way in that Ford GT.
Yeah, it's a twisty little section here at the back of the track through the stadium. You can see the gravel appears on the outside of the track, and that will really slow you down. If you dip a tire onto it, it can lose you a position. It can lose you more than that if you're not careful. FRF Handicap is running in 2nd position. Handicap took that 5th place result in the first race and 3rd in the 2nd. And so, well, judging by that pattern, 5-3 should be winning this last race.
Should be, but he's going to have to get around Williams-Mitch to make that happen. And FRF clearly impressing Andy over on the other desk. He's impressing us too, doing a lot more than we were expecting from the young Brazilian driver.
Well, Handicap was the driver you were talking about, how vibrant he was earlier on. What an exciting character on track. He's got a shock of bleach blonde hair on him and losing the rear there. See him getting a little bit perhaps too excited on the throttle pedal.
Yeah, he's got a bit of a gap back to 3rd in the Williams Roadrunner, so it's not a cause for concern. But it does mean that the little blue speck that was in the front of the screen has now completely disappeared as Williams-Mitch comes back into viewing for the hairpin, but he won't stay there for very long.
Roadrunner now. He's been running this Koenigsegg all day long. It's a car which I like with him, actually. Roadrunner and the Koenigsegg seem to get on well. And back to 5th position with the FRFs. Actually a second driver here, a strong showing from FRF. Now I think about it, we've got Handicap up there in 2nd, Tesla in 5th. This could be some pretty good points for the Brazilian team. Yeah, chasing down Lazarus Racers, so that is going to be an issue. There was an avoidable contact penalty I was just heard. That was a warning. McQueen. Well, lightning, ciao, that's not how you get it done, buddy. But now he's had his warning. Now he's gotten that out of the way, so now he knows what not to do, and hopefully that means head down. And for teammate FRF Bull, we were a little bit worried about Bull in a China shop sort of situation here, a very aggressive track that welcomes that kind of behavior, but Bull right now running P12, 3/10 of a second behind Williams 7. Well, if you're at the back of the pack, at least you can see everyone out of one window, and looking forward up the road, Bull is C7 there. 7, what a... I mean, let's not sugarcoat this. What a terrible day at the track for Williams 7. Watching his teammates out there run things. Williams Mitch taking win after win, and 7 forced to sit back here in the rear of the pack and watch as his teammates take that glory. And the worst part is, Ali, his day isn't done yet, because it looks like Williams is going to be moving on. So he's got 3 more races to watch his teammates take all the glory, and he just sits back there in P7, P11, P12. Not fun. That's right, 3 more races after this one's completed, and just lap 3 of the way through this 3rd race. Lots of 3s happening today. RZM McQueen on board with him now, just inside that top 10, but earlier on this race, McQueen was running well with his teammates around him. He looked strong. It looked like RZM would be able to get a sort of strategic stronghold in this race. Yeah. But McQueen's taking penalties now, taking warnings. What's going wrong for him? But McQueen wasn't supposed to be in this race, pure and simple. He wasn't expecting to have to drive at the start of the week. You don't mentally prepare yourself for that. And he's somebody whose favorite driver, remember Williams Mitch, he's got the boy crush on, or the man crush. That's right. That's the guy who's been cleaning up. So you get a bit frazzled when you're dealing with people that you really respect. They're doing really well, and quite frankly, you're not. He's going to have to find a way of defrazzling himself, which is a motorsport coaching term, and getting himself back on track. Somebody who doesn't need to do that is Lazarus's Rossi, a real somebody with such a deep game knowledge, incredible amount of strategic knowledge about the game. I do slightly wonder with the Lazarus team whether or not Rossi and their coach Dino are kind of playing dueling banjos in terms of who it is who gets to make the strategy calls. Yeah, it could be a little bit of that, but also Rossi with a move now for 6th place, and he takes it quite easily. Looked like a bit of damage there on RZM Chris's car as Rossi moves up into 6th, and now he looks forward to try and catch back up to Tesla. That damage, just the aileron at the front, the little air brake poking up and down on that very innovative design of the Pagani Huayra. Rossi up to 6th, so a nice move from him. I wonder whether or not it's been forwards and backwards with Chris behind, because I know that Pagani is going to be stronger through the twisty sections, through the corners, and we're coming up to those twisty sections right now. It's with that stadium complex you were talking about, Shay. Putting yourself in a driver's eye view, putting yourself in someone like Racer's seats here in 4th. What do you think when you're coming into a section like the stadium? You look around, you take a moment to appreciate everything that's going on, and you know if you're going to make a pass, there's going to be a lot of photos of it, because everybody has their iPhone out or their Android phone, whatever it is. Everybody's got the video ready, and they're ready to make it viral. So if you've got an opportunity to make a show, you do it in the stadium section. Absolutely awesome. What a arena for racing it is here at Hockenheim. Maybe we can sit back and listen in on that incredible twin-turboed engine of Williams Roadrunner's Koenigsegg. Lap 5 of 9 here at Hockenheim, and it's the 3rd race, the first match of the ForzaRC Invitational Series. $250,000 on the line for these teams, and they're fighting for that lion's share of it. We're not there yet, though. Just the online series just beginning. The first skirmishes, the first shots across the bow. And Williams Mitch, what a power player he has been so far today, Shay.
Driving in that Ford GT in the exotic GT category, a car designed to do one thing, Ali, to go out and win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Contested there 4 times, and in its first, it did get that win back in 2016. It truly is a supercar, but a remarkable performance from the Ford GT, given that it's out there against cars like the Koenigsegg, designed to slow down in no time at all. It gets up to the top speed, but it also won awards for superior braking.
That's right, it's an incredible machine, that Koenigsegg, and don't mistake it. It looks like a top speed machine. It looks like something that will only work on a salt flat, but you put it on a track and it does pretty good there too.
Yeah, it does. It might not have the cornering ability that some of the other cars do, but for example, the Huayra was built for great braking and great cornering. The Koenigsegg was built just for the great speed and the great braking, but it's still holding its own as there's contact.
It's Rossi sliding out on the way out of the final corner, and his teammate, seeing his teammate slide around there, Force One gives Chris a little tap. I wonder whether he was saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing to my team?" Rossi all over the track there, and I wonder how that worked out. I'm looking back through the ticket here, and no, Rossi, he's not in 8th, he's not even 9th, where he's right back at the rear of this pack. Holy moly, Shay.
That was teammate contact too, Ali, as the Aston Martin of Chris was hit by the bikini of Chris. That was not as they planned it to go.
Well, 3 Rise Motorsport machines here running beautifully close to each other, but Kiat Shay knows the risk here, and that, of course, is teammate-to-teammate contact, and there it is. There's the tap from the bottom left, and that was Chris just getting his Pagani into the rear of the Ford GT. These 3 drivers, they do give us edge of the seat action, Shay.
Ali, there is one rule in motorsport. Do not hit your teammate. These guys have not had teammates before. Perhaps they didn't know that rule. But guys, don't hit your teammate. What are you doing out there?
How did I know you weren't about to give them a glowing review, Shay? It sounds as though you're starting to look at like the RZM team and think maybe there's some improvements that can be made.
Rise can rise from the ashes of this race. I believe in them. But come on. I feel like I should sit them down and say, okay, I realize you don't have a coach this week because your driver is one of your coaches. But guys, do you ever watch racing? Do you ever watch Williams and see how they're winning these things?
That's right.
They're not hitting each other. The good news is, though, Ali, at least the cars are painted the same color. You won't be able to see the paint from the other cars on your car.
It's true, it just fills in all the scratches. You're right. They'll mostly buff out.
I need a little bit of orange here. Can you come hit me on my right rear quarter pin? Thanks, buddy.
Thanks so much. Perfect. Yeah, perfect. LZR races. We're back in this fight for 3rd place. Williams Roadrunner has been holding back the Porsche of races. Well, for the whole of this race, but also these two have had some close races in previous matchups as well. I remember specifically last race at Silverstone. Racers got ahead of Roadrunner early and managed to hold that lead. I wonder if it's about momentum here. You have to break Roadrunner early on.
Well, Roadrunner never really made his way back up to the podium in that. It was the 2 Porsches running around together. His handicap was right behind Racers. Now, Racers is sitting off the podium. Handicap is up there in 2nd. But Chris getting 5-second penalty for the contact there.
5
so
seconds.
It's worse. You hit your teammate, that's bad enough. You hit your teammate and get a penalty for it, that's really bad. You hit your teammate and get a 5-second penalty. You might as well take your headset off and go home at this point.
That's right, poor old Chris. I wonder if it was for his teammate contact or for the contact with LZR Rossi coming out of the last corner. So I saw that as well. Spun Rossi round all the way back to last place and really dashed Lazarus's hopes of putting up a good challenge against Williams here. Lazarus were the only thing standing between us and pure Williams domination, as Flipmo was talking about earlier on.
It is nice to see Williams dominating, though.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it
makes a change.
Exactly, a team not necessarily associating with winning lately, but just hearing that penalty now was actually for a different hit, so that's the good news.
Interesting.
It doesn't come down to teammate-on-teammate violence. As we ride on board with Bull, still sitting in last place for the 20-year-old Brazilian, who is a student, and the rule breaker has been very, very patient today, and he's not been somebody we've talked about. I'm impressive from the maturity we've seen from Bull.
It's interesting, isn't it? The progression of a driver over their career, how their character changes. I wonder, you often see these very young drivers new to competition who are a bit fiery out there, and sometimes there's a bit of a lull, a period where they don't succeed quite as much as they used to, but they don't get in the trouble they used to either.
Yeah.
And then you build up to real success and real form.
It's teenagehood. It's going from being a toddler, you learn how to walk, you go to a little bit of elementary school, and then you hit your rebellious phase, and then you grow out of it. Right, Allie? You grew out of your rebellious phase?
I never grew out of it,
No, I
Shay.
didn't think so.
Yeah,
You're still in toddler, aren't you?
I'm still listening to that rock and roll. Here we are, third place, Williams Roadrunner. We've had a look at this battle throughout this race, and well, I can't see a way that Racers can get through. I know that he's right up against the rear of Roadrunner's bumper, but with these two drivers, without teammate help, without anything else changing, I just can't see how Racers can sneak a move here.
Well, Roadrunner doesn't need the third place points for Williams to move on, have an opportunity to better their best score.
Okay.
Racers needs the third place points because this is it for Lazarus in round 1. But Williams wants to get the best possible score they can here, just in case the next time out, if the competition's a bit more stiff. I mean, we know that Red Bull's coming towards Williams. That's going to be a good competition, and it's been a very lopsided points distribution so far. That said, Racers has nothing to lose because he has 1 lap left.
1 lap remaining, and Tesla has a little look at Force 1 on the way into that first corner, the little fast right-hand kink that these drivers have been bouncing their cars over the curbs of. Such high curves here at Hockenheim. Force 1 holds Tesla back, though, for now, and keeps those precious points for LZR. As you say, Shay, all the points will be locked for the LZR team and for every team that doesn't move forward. So they need everything that they can get, everything they can salvage here in the final race. Back on board with Chris, who's been a bit of a naughty boy this race and is just following his teammate home at this point.
All 3 of them, 7th, 8th, and 9th for Rise Motorsport. It's not a great end of the day, but at least they're going to make it home. Maybe they're going to do...
Another touch, I think. Chris there, wide at the hairpin. I didn't see the entrance to it, but where his car was positioned, it looked like it had a helping hand to run that wide.
No damage to the back, though, so maybe it was just losing rear grip, maybe breaking rear traction. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt at this point, Allie.
Williams Mitch, third drive of the day, third win of the day as he comes through the double right-hander here at the end of the Hockenheim circuit, and what an incredible performance from an absolute, a hair, we have to call him a hair, the person strategically placed to win races and has delivered on that investment, delivered on that promise, and Williams will be ecstatic with that. FRF handicap crosses the line to take second place. Williams Roadrunner will hold on for that last place on the podium, and Racers gives up, gets it to the pit wall and gives his teammates a little bit of a wave as he goes on past. What an awesome third race, Shay.
That really was. What a great comeback from Roadrunner, too, because he was somebody that we talked about in the first race, not so much in the second race, but he made sure that we were talking about him in the third one. I'm gutted for Lazarus and what happened to them over the course of the race with Rossi getting taken out.
That's right.
That's a huge momentum shift. And as we were just talking about, the points that you walk away from today, if that's it, that's all you get from round 1. Well, when you're up against Williams, and it's such a powerhouse move, I mean, more than 100 points for them on today. When we see the score tallied up, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
Incredible.
How are you supposed to compete when you're in a group with them? You walk away with 30 points and you feel like, I did good.
Well, let's face it, Shay, we've got 13 teams in the online section of this competition, and only 8 are going to make their way into the offline playoffs.
Yeah.
At the end of this, only the very best can move forward. And, you know, we're looking at people like Williams out there dominating, smashing it. Yeah, right now they're able to do that, but, well, a little bit later in this series, it's going to be the very top against the very top.
Exactly, and we've only had match 1. We still have so many more to come, and you think about what we're going to see in match 2. 3 different teams for Williams to go up against. Can they continue this dominant streak? Can they continue taking all the points away? Because if they don't, we've got teams who, for example, let's just say a number out of my head, 26 points to Lazarus from today. Well, if we go into the next round and 3 teams are walking away with 40 points, that already puts Lazarus in a hole.
23, 4.
It's totally just numbers, just spewing numbers. It's like cricket for me. I have no idea what goes on in cricket. I just hear numbers.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm not ready yet, though, quite to move on from that third race. It was too cool. I think somebody who we haven't maybe given the credit that he deserves yet is Williams Roadrunner. First race, it was pretty obvious. Second place, 1-2 for Williams. Yeah. But it was those consistent performances that he put in. 5th and then 3rd in the second and third race, Shay, that really cemented this for the Williams team.
And it's ironic, too, because Roadrunner is the driver that I have the question mark next to as far as teamwork goes.
Wow.
Because that's something that he is really new to, and it's something that we've seen in the past, not his strongest attribute. So perhaps that's what Williams did, was to make him more important to the team effort and to sacrifice 7. How's 7 going to bounce back from this, though? Because Williams 7 has been at the back. I was going to say he's been nowhere, but he has been at the back for every race.
I mean, let's be real. I mean, Harmonic, talk to 7. Get on the phone to that guy.
Yes.
Because he is going to need a little bit of a confidence boost, I think, coming out of that first round. It's tough not to do well, but it's hard not to do well when your teammates are performing so strongly.
I don't actually know the answer to this, so I might be throwing you under the bus a little bit with it. Is it possible for the next round for them to switch the roles of Mitch and 7?
Wow.
Can they let 7 run away with 3 wins in the Ford GT?
Oh, I see. To give him that lovely moment. I don't think so, though. I think that car's built around Mitch. It's built for him, and that's the car that he's got to own for the whole 6 matches. So
they don't
sadly,
have time to do a seat fitting.
Yeah,
and
there's no time to change.
Oof,
so
gosh.
7 up for 3 more matches.
I'm sorry,
adjudication granted. Adjudication not completed yet, but it looks like 7's going to be up for 3 more matches of that punishment.
They're going to need to send him something to make it through, like a nice cake or something.
A therapy animal, a support
a therapy
animal.
cat would be great. Oh, a stuffed animal just to sit right here. That would work.
Perfect.
The 24-year-old Frenchman who, well, he's 24. He can have a bottle of wine at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah, true. Yeah, he can wind down. He can wind down later on. So hopefully 7, you get a moment later on in the day to forget the first 3 races of this competition. Although you won't want to forget the incredible performance of your team. Shay, there are 3 other teams out there on track. We might not have noticed. We didn't spend a lot of time looking at them because they didn't do as well. But out of the 3 other teams, out of Rise Motorsport, Lazarus, and FRF, who stood out for you as maybe the second runner, the clear second there? Or was there none?
There wasn't a clear second. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but the team that was the most surprising, the team that we declared the underdogs before things even began, the Brazilian team, Fast Racers Forza, they're the ones who really came to the front, particularly with the drive that we saw from Handicap. He just was consistent in the Porsche. He was comfortable in it. Didn't matter the track conditions. He was able to outdrive the other Porsche, specifically at Hockenheim. That was a very impressive performance.
Yeah, that was a super impressive performance. I was really disappointed to see Rossi spinning in that final race as well, because I think Rossi and this format are like they're perfect for each other. Bread and butter.
There you go.
Horse and carriage. All those nice things. They're perfect for each other because he's got such a deep game knowledge. He's so quick to adapt to different cars. So yeah, a real shame for Rossi.
I completely agree, and I feel like the race results might look a little bit different if Rossi hadn't been taken out so early. But let's have a look at them now.
Yeah, here we go. So Mitch will take that win, at least provisionally. And you can see Handicap second across the line. The only thing standing between Williams and that 1-2 finish. 7 way back in 11th, Shay. And who stands out to you? RZM, I guess, all 3 together.
Chris with 4 positions gained.
Wow.
That is a big move from the driver who started right at the back of the grid.
Yeah.
But the fact that RZM, all 3 of their cars together, all 3 of their drivers together on the track, which was not a good thing, let's be honest about that, that's pretty staggering. It tells a good story. It wasn't a bad day for Lazarus, though. You look at 4th, 5th, and 10th before everything else is factored in. That's a good result from the team that was struggling to try and get second.
All right, well, let's check out the penalties in that second race and see who got penalized. Just one being handed out. It's a 5-seconder for Chris, who's going to tumble down the order. I think that would be to do with the collision we saw there with Rossi. We chatted a little bit about it. Maybe, you can never give the time back to the person disadvantaged in motorsport, but that might feel okay for Rossi. He did at least get past Chris.
No.
No?
That doesn't do it for you. If you're a race car driver, there's one thing you want, and that's vengeance. You don't want a penalty for somebody else because that doesn't give you back what you lost. You want brutal, brutal vengeance.
Well, there's no chance for it. No 4th race. So Rossi and Chris, a score unsettled as we head further on into the championship. Final points up on the screen there, and you can see Mitch is going to take that 20, Handicap with the 15, and just 12 for Roadrunner in 3rd. It's those top points, Shay, that I think we've really seen. That's been how Williams has succeeded here. There are a lot more points for the winning, and the gap back to second is much higher than the gap in the mid-pack.
There's 20 points for first. There are 10 points for fourth. So even though Lazarus had a good race with 2 of their 3 drivers, the third one being taken out, you're still coming home with less than half as many from both of your drivers as one guy got. That's not a good feeling.
All right, well, match 1 is all wrapped up and in the books, and there's so much to unpack. Let's head on over to the analysts and find out a little more.
Well, 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 3 races down. Our first match almost complete once we get you all the fancy points and everything. We're back at the analyst desk, and we're going to hop right into some replays, actually, of that last race, because there was so much for us to go ahead and track of what went down, well, on the track. Particularly, if we're starting things off, we're looking at FRF and what they were able to do differently, especially if you compare it to race number 1. It almost looks like a very different team here, doesn't it?
Keep in mind, this is a team that still has to fight for something. This is Tesla making some moves, or at least putting Force One on the back foot. This team still has to fight. If you're thinking ranking the seeds, they may be a last chance qualifier type team, Brian.
When you are putting someone like Force One under that kind of pressure, Force One already has a second worth of penalty here in this battle. I think Force One is on the edge here. He knows he's got some penalties, and Tesla, I should say, is doing exactly what he needs to be doing, continuing to pressure the faster driver.
His best performance right here, FRF Tesla of the day with a 6th place finish.
Because while, yes, you want to strive for that podium finish and be great within that particular race, these drivers have to think about the fact that it's 8 total weeks of competition. And when you're trying to get through those first 6 weeks, you don't want to be put in that last chance qualifier. So when it comes to that 6th place finish and what Tesla was able to demonstrate that he could do differently this time around, then what was it that was so prized about him in his performance here?
Huge boost of confidence. He's got to have that right now. And when he's not racing right any later today, going into next week, he's got to be happy about that.
Really consistent too. Remember, he had a 7th place finish in the first race, 7th in the second race, and 6th in the first. You can't. That's almost as consistent as you can be. Obviously, handicap's the star of this team. It feels like, but Tesla's pulling the right amount of weight.
All right. Well, I am happy to say we're going to have our final match results to know who will be moving on into our second match that we have lined up. And I think we all got a pretty hefty feeling. We got one person racking in all of these points with 60 and 107 for Williams Esports in total. They definitely earned that spot.
Mitch by himself almost outscored Lazarus. 5 points away. If it had just been Mitch, he could have almost beaten the Lazarus team in total. Incredible.
Now, how about FRF jumping Rise there? FRF earned it, in my opinion, and Rise almost kind of fell apart, too.
Well, that's the thing. It's not just a matter of FRF doing well. You look at lap 6. Rise had an opportunity to work collectively as a team, but that's not what happened, was it?
No. It's this is a team that ironically finished 7th, 8th, and 9th. In any other match race, they would have gotten a boost out of that. But in the third round, that does you no good. You're going for the points, and you've got to work together.
Now, they'll be back. They'll have an opportunity to race. I say focus and look forward to their next round.
This is just our first week, after all, of our Invitational series. But the thing is, Williams Esports, they have put their name on the map. And with coaches being a huge part of what we've got going on, I think it's about time we talk to the coach himself. Harmonic is the one that has been steering the wheel behind the team of Williams Esports. So let's go ahead and hear from the coach. We luckily have an interview all lined up to give some insight to the audience. So there we go, Harmonic right on our screen. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, especially after that result. How's everybody doing over there?
Oh, well,
great.
We're doing pretty fabulous, getting to watch what you and the rest of the team were able to bring together. And the first thing I want to ask you is, clearly there was a prioritization on teamwork, not just on the road, but some prep that went in beforehand. So when preparing for this Invitational series, how much of an emphasis did you put on that compared to just sheer driving skill?
Well, when we saw that it was a team event this year, obviously priority number 1 was teamwork. That's what's going to win you races or get you the most points and get you to events. So all of our decisions that we made were with teamwork in mind, and I'm glad to see that it paid off today.
What about the car selections and the builds? Because there was a lot of power put behind Mitch specifically.
So we saw that in testing, Mitch was consistently just that little bit quicker, so we thought that putting him in the strongest car was the best option. And then in the other groups, we determined what the best cars were for the rest of the drivers, and then from there, we determined where the PI was best spent to get the most amount of points in a race.
Now, Harmonic, you yourself are a very experienced driver, so you have that capability of putting yourself in their shoes, but you have a whole new responsibility this time around when it's up to you to talk to them, to bring them through mentality-wise. So what are some of the types of things that you said to the drivers throughout each of these races, specifically Seven, since he was getting a bit separated from the rest of his team pack?
So we kept communications fairly limited. I didn't want to keep breathing down their necks while they're trying to put in laps. So I let them do their thing and only told them super important things that were happening on track. And as far as Seven goes, he's actually, I would say he was the most important player of the team today. He, the way we built his car, it set it a little bit farther behind the other cars, but he was still just as quick as every other car in his division. And that extra PI that we took away from that car let us put it on Roadrunner and Mitch's cars, and that's what got us such outstanding results today.
Well, my last question for you is the results are in, you are moving on into the next match, but that also means you are making a statement for Williams Esports throughout this entire Invitational series. So what does it mean to you having such a strong start in week 1 of 8?
So the best part of this was that we found out what works, some things that didn't, but we also know how much luck can affect our results. We definitely had some things go our way in races 1 and 2. And also because of our performance this week, we have another match coming up just in a bit that'll let us test the waters a bit further on strategy. So that'll definitely help us in the rounds to come.
Well, thank you, Harmonic. It was great hearing from you, and best of luck to you and your team going into the second match of the day. Man, it's always cool to get to hear from the coaches themselves because they have so much insight. And one thing in particular he said, he actually kept communication pretty limited during the game. So what do you think was some of the reasoning behind that and trying to keep the even cool keel?
My guess is these guys are all clinical. They are very measured in how they approach Forza and how they approach racing. This was a decision they made early on. I would have expected that maybe Harmonic would have been in 7-0 a little bit because we know 7, and we saw it in chat that he's getting a bit upset about what's happening to him in those races. But it sounds like he just wanted them to do their best work on the field and not get in their heads.
Cool. Remember, he was a late addition to this team, and these guys have driven together all summer. So he's here really just to give him that extra coaching, help him out with the math, things they don't see. They're plenty of skilled driver on their own.
Yeah.
We've had a moment to get to see what's happened. Our first match is in the books. So before we set off into a break into our second half of this broadcast, I just want to hear your thoughts on how the first match went down today in the Invitational Series.
It's what we talked about at the very top. We are doing things differently this time around. We've got strategy in mind. We've got coaches who are coaching these guys, and in some cases, replacing them as drivers. So there's a new layer here that I think we're seeing unfold. We've seen the very beginnings of it here. Harmonic was talking about the fact that we learned a lot here in match 1. We're going to apply those learnings to match 2. The wheels are turning in all of these drivers' heads. It's fascinating to watch.
To me, the boost upgrades, it's too difficult. I think that's awfully hard to interpret mid-race. I saw a lot of racing today. Will we see that in the next match?
All right. Well, I think we have a lot to break down after that and a lot to prepare for with our second match of the day. But first things first, with everything new that we've brought to the table with the Invitational Series, we of course want to know your feedback. So make sure you head over to ask.ms/ForzaRC survey to share with us your thoughts on the broadcast. You can also find that link in chat to go to it directly. And don't forget, we do have a poll going with the liveries that you have seen earlier. Who do you think was the most important painter? Go ahead and vote and let us know. But when we return, we will learn more not just about match number 2, but things like the Mellis Show and Forza Monthly.
Oh.
If you're wondering what that is, you're going to have to stay tuned. So everybody grab a soda pop or whatever rocks your socks, and we'll be right back.